Lama dan jambe yana gyube chansa lo kanshi chanjo shiwan chundu dude bunje sada kala gyunkya jin dorje dondon dane kolo meda jedan kari chenwe chalbe bam zuzhulo nambara chuje dode mendo dajen chanjo dochi zanba na Chambe tuge le bala pamze zobe sange ganye te la ge cha ca kige shenge te le do samda jorwa pezo chanjo tambara tuge se saya nambara chudo yo chendan tsujime le ju shen sedan zenje gombara Someday, Shera Taljin be Parolo Chinzo Keshat. Joga Tambo Damba na Jiden Kebara Tamje. Dunama Shendo Doba Ge Mude Cheba Tada. Tele Kige Demba Ne Nime Vishin Chinde. Damba Gundo Milu be Zala Kula Kige Sura Singe da Laje Jide Chaba Sanda Kevjo Kubarak Laya Lama Wadra Shum Tuba Game Joga da Chason Geba Nechons Chaba Toba Teda Gun Chige Pamze Kyolad Kige Chanju Chonye Ne Jove Tenze Ngosarachi Sibe Sede Majo Guso dangwe babo dang nige guso mise para kela pembara chawo gome daja jezun wa gombo kela dakya che gawe dude durwa ude male pamze dang nyende loma changme chu gyase dangba dungde teje lezo tongwa nam kige yende tunyere chanjo ledo juba Layan kela dagya che kege sene jambe yang roma shara dadi. Chamba gyaza dambara ze simje sushi te zomsa. Kege yende meje ca sege yende towe kyare sharve sije ge beme nige vese. Chidara wadan chini che kege namba kunye be shebe chinde tenshin Juba Kela Daja Za Tedra Juve Lama Shakiri Purama Shimbe Tungye Lecho Jumde Zobe Sange De Bai Juve Gungen Yudu Tobara Sho Lama Dang Gombo Jizin Jambe Yala Gube Chatsa Kange le je jimye jenjala nyedara namda rabsabe shinye dengun shishin sije nige tugara lebamze kada sibe zarara mari mentum dungala gisebe jozo gunla puje daze yana chushu yande son jodara chujo nyamo nilon lege chajo joze jing Mare mese dungla nyugu chinye cheze raje nam. Tene daje saje tasu yende linzo gyase tuwo. Juda juda chunye genje dalu mese jambe yana de. Sheja tamche sibe je yamba jugin gele jube tuje jen. Samye chinde zebe donga. Jamge lame shabla ge cha tsal. Senden kege kera vesege dale dimo memba rapsa. Gada tenje shunlo dobai. Leje bobe na wa za du so. Sashe beju jushin mendo jamrira nishe nide geba. Sange shindo mide bulwa ye joge namda shindo chebana. Semje namge samba loye cheda chedara wa chijun tumo tebai chuge kolo kordo sol. So greetings to all. And today we are going to continue from where we left off last time, and we're currently in the chapter of generosity. So today we will be starting from where it says discerning the individual antidotes.
大家吉祥如意。我们今天还是从我们上一次留下来的部分继续讲。我们上一次讲到了布施品，我们今天在布施品当中详细的讲对治自性的分别分析。
So earlier in the previous class, we have already gone through the general definition of the generosity, and also the faults in this life and the future lifetimes if one does not practice the generosity.
我们上一节课讲了布施的定义，以及如果我们不行持布施的话，对今生以及来世的过患。
So we'll be continuing from where we left off and discerning the individual antidotes. To speak of this, the antidote to the cause of stinginess. The cause of stinginess is attachment to material things. Therefore, you should mentally cultivate and realize its opposite. So now we need to speak of the antidotes to the faults. So there's the antidotes to the cause and the result. First of all, we will speak of the antidote to the result later on. So first of all, we need to speak of the antidote to the cause. The cause here. So first of all, we should recognize what is the cause and what is the result. So the cause is stinginess, and the cause is attachment to material things, and the result is stinginess. So when you have attachment to material things, from that comes stinginess. So we should first understand that.
我们接着上一次讲的，我们接下来讲关于布施的对治自性的分别分析。首先，我们要讲的就是对治布施的就是对治因的这个对治。那首先这个因的这个对治，因就是我们对财物有贪着，也就是我们有执着。那这个果报的话，就是我们就会有吝啬心。那所以我们先要讲对治这个因，也就是如何来对治我们对财物的执着。
And so there are antidotes to both the cause and the result. There's an antidote to deal with the attachment to material things, and there's also antidotes to deal with stinginess, the result.
关于对治的方法的话，有两种，一个是关于对治因的对治，就是如何对治我们的执着，对财物的执着；另外一个对治，也就是对果的对治，就是如何来对治我们的吝啬心。
So first, we're going to speak of the antidote to the cause, which is the cause of stinginess, which is attachment to material things. So this antidote is useful to bring in when there is the attachment to material things, before stinginess is born in one's mind, before stinginess arises or before one becomes stingy. In the beginning stage, there's the attachment to material things. So if we can bring in the antidote to that, to the cause, then the result will not arise. So therefore, this is important.
首先，我们讲因的对治。那因的对治就是我们对财物有执着。那在吝啬心真正升起的时候，我们一旦对财物有执着，就会升起4种不同的吝啬心。那如果我们把因对治了，就是对治了我们对财物的执着的话，那果报就是真正的吝啬心也就不会升起。
So if one wonders what is the antidote to the attachment to material things, it's quite simple. As it says here, therefore, you should mentally cultivate and realize its opposite. So basically, we need to bring in whatever is the opposite of attachment to material things. So that would be non-attachment or detachment.
那我们来讲如何来对治我们的对财物的执着，这就非常简单。如果要对治我们对财物的执着的话，就要使用对财务执着的对立面，也就是放弃对财物的执着，对财物没有执着。
And it says, for this, reflect on the words of the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, which was composed by Shantideva. And as it was taught in there, because of the torments of collecting, guarding, and losing it, You should know that wealth is an endless cause of harm. For those who are attached to wealth and distracted by gaining and keeping it, there is no way to become free from the sufferings of existence.
那我们在对治因的时候，就是应该像在入行论，也就是寂天菩萨所造的入行论当中所说的：几乎好尽苦，因知财多祸，贪金换散人，脱苦遥无期。
So therefore, as it says here, this quote from the Shantideva's way of the Bodhisattva way of life, it is telling you of what it is the faults of being attached to material things. So when you understand the faults of being attached to it, then you will naturally not be attached to it because you understand the faults. Usually we are attached to something because we see a good quality, something special about it. But when we understand its flaws, and that the flaws weigh heavier than the good qualities of it, then we will naturally not feel great attachment towards it. So therefore, this quote is teaching us of the faults of being attached to material things.
这里寂天菩萨的入行论当中，就是教我们要认识执着的过患，因为我们一旦知道了执着有哪些过患的话，自然就不会对财物升起执着的心。那所以这里就是寂天菩萨就是让我们看到，比如说我们对一个财物有执着的话，就是因为我们看到了这个财物它的特别之处，或者是它的好处。但是如果我们观察了以后，知道了这些财物的过患其实大于了它的好处的话，那自然也就不会升起执着的心。所以这里就是先要思维我们所执着的这个财物的过患。
And so there are mainly three faults related to that, related to wealth. So because of the traumas of collecting, guarding, and losing it, so what this means is that there's great suffering when it comes to collecting wealth. And in the beginning process, we need to first collect it. When we don't have wealth, we need to first gather wealth, or we need to collect wealth. Or in other words, we need to earn money or earn, wealth. And then once one has attained it, then one needs to guard it. One needs to take care of the wealth. And then in the end, one will eventually lose the wealth. So this is the process of, related to wealth. First you collect it, then you guard it, then you end up losing it. And there's great suffering in all three of those.
那这里就是讲钱财的3种过患。那钱财带来的痛苦主要是分3种痛苦。首先是一开始的时候，我们要积累钱财，在挣钱的过程当中会有许多的痛苦。第二步就是我们有了钱财之后，又要看护我们的钱财。最后一步就是我们的钱财总有一天都会失去。那这3个过程当中，积财以及看护以及失去的这个钱财的过程当中，都有分别的痛苦。
For example, in the beginning, when we collect wealth, there's great physical and mental suffering. We have to go through many physical and mental hardships in order to collect the wealth, because wealth is not something that is easily obtainable. So therefore, we need to go through many difficulties. And due to that, our mind becomes clouded with negative emotions. And due to that, then we end up accumulating lots of negative deeds just in order for us to get our way to obtaining the wealth. So therefore, due to the strong attachment and the many great hardships of collecting it, we end up having negative emotions in our mind. And then due to that, we cause a lot of bad karma. We cause not only suffering for ourselves, but we also give work to others, and so that one may obtain the wealth, and we also end up making others accumulate negative deeds as well, just for the sake of obtaining wealth for oneself.
比如在第一个阶段，在我们积累钱财的过程当中，会遭受很多的身心的痛苦，因为要积累钱财并不是件容易的事情。那在这个过程当中，我们因为要积累钱财，我们的心里就会被许许多多的恶念，被许许多多的杂念所困扰。在这个过程当中，因为我们心里被杂念、被恶念所困扰的话，也会导致我们因为要积累财富，造下了许许多多的恶业，只是因为要想要积累很多的财富，那这样的话又会导致自己带来许多的痛苦。那在这个过程当中，我们为了给别人工作，让别人挣钱，那又会让其他的人又会让其他的人像我们一样，心里产生的许多的烦恼、许多的恶念，又使他们造了许多的恶业。这一切都是为了要积累财富。
And then also, once one has finally obtained the wealth after having gone through many hardships, then one needs to guard the wealth from uh, becoming exhausted. So therefore, one needs to look after the wealth. One needs to make sure that it does not become exhausted. And that is also a very tricky thing to do because it's a whole the whole situation can make you become very worried that you'll become very worried that you will lose your wealth or if it will be taken by others, and all of that. There's many mental suffering now once you have already obtained the wealth. Usually we think that it's common for us to think that once we have attained the wealth, whether it be money or anything, then all of our problems are going to go away. But that is not the case, because once we have obtained it, then mental suffering also still follows, because we need to guard it. And we're always going to be occupied with that worry that one will lose one's wealth.
在第二步当中，就是积累钱财的这个我们在积累钱财之后，要看护我们的钱财。那这个过程也是非常的难，也会非常也很容易导致许多的痛苦。因为我们在看护我们的钱财的时候，很容易担心我们的钱财会失去，或者被别人拿走等等。这一切的想法就会给我们带来心理上很多的痛苦。通常我们都认为，只要有了钱财的话，就好像一切问题都解决了，不光是钱财，还是其他的财富。但其实我们在有了钱财或者是其他的财富的话，还是会有许许多多的问题，会导致许多的心理上的痛苦，也会使我们非常的担心、焦虑。
And then in the end, it is the nature for one to lose the wealth, because that is the nature of the world. It is, everything is impermanent. So the wealth is also a part of that. The wealth is also impermanent. So once one has obtained it, at one point one needs to let go of it as well, because it is impermanent. So that it can be either by, like, someone may take away your wealth, it may become stolen, or even if it is not stolen, if one uses one's wealth, it will slowly exhaust. And that is the same as losing the wealth, because you've used it up. So the more you use it, the less you have left. So that is also losing wealth. Then even if one has been successful in keeping the wealth for one's whole lifetime, at the moment of death, then one also needs to let go of it, because you cannot when you die, you cannot take along with you the wealth that you have accumulated in your lifetime. So either way, you're going to lose all the wealth that you have accumulated in the end. So there's great suffering in that as well.
那最后一个阶段就是我们的钱财在积累了钱财之后的话，钱财自然都会钱财在自然过程当中总会失去，就好像在世界的万法的自信都是无常一样。那之后的话，我们就不得不要放弃我们的钱财，有可能我们钱财会被别人拿走，会被别人偷走，或者我们自己也使用。那我们自己使用的话，把钱财用完了，也就和像被别人拿走一样是一样的，我们的钱财就会这样以此的方式而失去。那我们要如果就算我们把钱财保存的非常好的话，那死亡来临的时候，我们也不得不要放弃我们的钱财。所以说就是不管是嗯就不管是什么样的情况，当我们失去钱财的时候，都会带来许许多多的痛苦。
And so therefore, for those who are attached to wealth and distracted by gaining and keeping it, there's no way to become free from the sufferings of existence. So when you are too attached or too focused on gaining and keeping the wealth, and you become distracted by that, then it is impossible to become free from the sufferings of samsara. Because in order to become free from the sufferings of samsara, you need to be non-attached to material things. The way to liberation is the path of non-attachment. When you attach to something, then that's the opposite of the path to liberation. That will from obtaining liberation.
对，没办法，就是要放下对一切财物的执着。一旦升起了执着心的话，对财物这种升起极大的痛苦。那有了执着心的话，也就是违背了解脱道。
Because when you wish to become free from samsara, first of all, as I mentioned, you need to have a non-attachment, a detachment from material things. And you need to see that it is all essenceless. As we say, there's 4 main preliminary practices: the difficulty of attaining a human body, the impermanence, and the cause and effect, and the faults of samsara. So these are faults of samsara. So you cannot obtain liberation or freedom from samsara if you don't see the faults of samsara. And for the person who is so attached and distracted by gaining and keeping wealth, they cannot see the faults of samsara because they are into the faults of samsara. They see something good about the faults of samsara. They don't see the faults. They see it as something that is good, and they don't understand that part of that everything is all the qualities that samsara has to offer are all faults, and to be abandoned and being essenceless. So therefore are meaningless, to be distracted, worthless, to be distracted by. So therefore it is like complete opposites. This will be a major obstacle if you are attached and distracted by wealth, for you to be free from samsara.
那我们要脱离轮回的话，最重要的就是要有一颗不执着的心。那也就是说，我们在轮回当中的这些，不管是钱财也好，其他也好，其实都是没有本质的意义。就好像我们在私家庭当中，人生难得，寿命无常，因果不虚，轮回过患这4个家庭当中，这积累钱财的这一点，就是属于轮回的过患。因为如果说我们非常的专注于去积累钱财的话，我们就看不到轮回的过患，那也就没有办法没有办法从轮回当中解脱。因为我们非常的专注于钱财，非常的去专注于这些钱财的好处，那自然也就看不到轮回的过患，那自然也生不起解脱的心。但是，因为我们总是看到钱财的好的一面，却看不到轮回的过患，看不到这一切都是，本质上是没有本质的意义的。所以有了这样的执着的心的话，就完全和解脱道背道而驰。
And we can go to the next slide.
那我们看下一页。
Also consider the following intermediary verse on this topic. So as it says here, when you have no wealth, you are poor because of needing to seek it. If you get a little bit, you are poor because it is too little. If you get a lot, you are poor because you are not satisfied. To partake of wealth without satisfaction is a cause for suffering. So this was written by Bodhisattva himself. This sort of quote that he's quoting, it's written by himself. So what it is saying is that for the person who has no wealth at all, that person is poor because they need to seek wealth. They don't have wealth, so they are poor because they don't have wealth.
这里是萨迦班智达自己写的一个寄颂：无才寻求苦，得微益少苦，多时无足苦，受用痛苦因。这里就是说了，因为钱财对于不同的人来说带来不同的痛苦。比如说没有钱财的人，因为他们没有钱财，那自然也会感受到许多的痛苦。
And then if you get a little bit, you are poor because it is too little. So what that means is that if you get a little bit of wealth, so that person who first did not have any wealth, so if that person does happen to obtain a little bit of wealth, now does that make that person not poor anymore because that person now has wealth? And the answer to that is that no, that person is still poor because the person has too little. The person does not have enough wealth, and so therefore that person is also one of the poor types of persons that there exists.
那对于拥有少许钱财的人来说，那他们是不是没有痛苦呢？他们之前没有钱财，现在有了少许的钱财，可他们还是非常的痛苦，或者是非常的穷苦，因为他们虽然说有了少许的钱财，但这些钱财不够他们使用，所以还是非常的痛苦。
And this means that the person who has obtained a little bit of wealth now, that type of person will most likely think that, the wealth that I have is still not enough. It's just too little. And so when you have that thought, that makes that person a poor person because the person has too little wealth.
拥有少许钱财的人，那他一旦心里想到了我现在拥有的钱财不够，一旦有了这样子的想法的话，这个想法就会让他变成非常穷苦的人。
And so now with this, we might think that, okay, the person who has no wealth at all is poor, certainly poor. And even the person who has obtained a little bit of wealth is poor. But surely the person who has obtained a great amount of wealth is not poor because that person would be rich. But then Sapin is saying, if you get a lot, you are poor because you are not satisfied. He's saying that the person who has obtained a great amount of wealth can also be considered poor, because that type of person is most likely to not be satisfied with the wealth they have. They're not content with what they have. They want more. They don't think that what I have is enough. They're always seeking for more, making more efforts to obtain more and more wealth. There's like no limit. So therefore, that person is always suffering because they are not satisfied with what they have. They are sort of restless. So therefore, that person can also be, the person who's rich, who has a lot of wealth, can also be considered poor and is poor.
那我们前面说了一点钱财都没有的人一定是苦的。那我们刚才也分析了，拥有少许钱财的人拥有少许钱财的人也是感受痛苦。那如果拥有很多钱财的人，那一定不会感受痛苦。但萨迦班智达在这里说，拥有很多钱财的人也是感受许多的痛苦，因为他们心里没有满足感，因为不满足就感受不到快乐，因为他们觉得自己拥有的钱财不够。那这样子的话，就会无止境的继续追求钱财，因为心里一直没有一种满足的感觉，所以他们也是痛苦的。
To illustrate the last part where it says, if you get a lot, you are poor because you are not satisfied. It is said that there was once a Bodhisattva who had a great faith, a great Bodhisattva. And this Bodhisattva who had great faith obtained a precious jewel one day. Someone offered probably a precious jewel to the Bodhisattva. And then the Bodhisattva thought that he should give this jewel to someone else. He should pass this jewel to someone else and not keep it for himself. So this Bodhisattva happened to live in Shravasti, the place in India known as Shravasti. And the Bodhisattva thought, he first considered, who should I give this gift to? Who should I give this precious jewel that I've just received to? Who should I donate it to? And when he looked across the Shravasti, he finally decided that he should give the precious jewel to the king of Shravasti.
这里就是讲一个公案来说明这一点。就是说以前有一位菩萨，他有非常虔诚的心，然后有一次他得到了一个非常殊胜的一个珍宝。当时这个菩萨就想，这个殊胜的珍宝不应该自己使用，应该给别人。当时这个菩萨就给了在印度守卫城的国王，就是给了守卫城的国王。
And so eventually he gave it to King Prasanajit. This was a king who lived during the Buddha's time. He gave the precious jewel to King Prasenajit, and the reason why was because the king was never content with the wealth that he had, so he was poor in that way, in that respect. So the Bodhisattva, understanding that, gave the jewel to the king because he was poor.
当时这个菩萨就把这个珠宝就给了一个叫菩萨拉吉的一个国王。
So therefore, to partake of wealth without satisfaction is a cause for suffering. So what this means is that if you use wealth without any satisfaction, that will lead to suffering. Because it is not a fault. The main point is not saying that we should not have wealth. We should not be associated with wealth. That is not the message. But if we use wealth, if we keep wealth, it should always be with satisfaction with what we have. We should always be content with whatever one has. And if you're not able to keep wealth in that way, and instead do it without any satisfaction, then it will only lead to suffering.
所以这里这个国王说的意思就是说，并不是说拥有许多的钱财本身有过往，而是说我们自己心里要有一颗满足的心。如果我们有了一颗满足的心的话，那我们也能够就是拥有很多钱财，也不会给我们带来许多的痛苦。
And we can go to the next slide.
那我们可以看下一页。
Here, the teacher should tell the story of how the kings Amitayasas and Mandata were not satisfied, even though they ruled as emperor, the four great continents, the sun and the moon, and even the heavens and including the divine realm of the 33, which is Trayatimsa. Here it is. There's two stories that Sapin is recommending that the teacher who is teaching the sage's intent should tell the students, which is the story of King Amitayasas and Mandata. And so these are two examples of kings who were not content with their wealth, and they were two powerful kings, and they were rulers of the four great continents. So the four great continents, sort of like the four main places where the humans live in the universe. And these two kings were also emperors or rulers of not only the four great continents, but also the sun, the moon, and many of the heavens up to the 33, which is the heaven of 33. And the heaven of 33 is the place where is the place where Indra or Sakra is just the same god with two different names, Sakra or Indra, where that king, who is the king of all of the gods, live. So these two kings also came into power of that rulership of the place, the heavenly realm known as the 33, where Indra lives. So they became very powerful.
这里就是参加班智达说，教授这个摩尼密写明论的老师还要讲两个公案，一个是国王扎巴塔雅的公案，还有一个就是自主龙王的公案。这两个公案都是说，对于积累钱财，对于积累钱财而心里不生满足心的两个公案。那这两个国王都是非常有权力的国王，那他们都统治了我们人类所居住的宇宙当中的4大洲，以及统治日月，以及统治33天以下的国王。那33天就是地是天所居住的天。那这两个国王他们都非常有权力，他们统治了33天以下的所有的部洲。
So to speak of this story, the main story that is going to be taught is Mandata, but it seems that Amitayasas and Mandata sort of lived a similar life. Whatever happened to them was similar. So the story that is going to be taught will mainly be based on what happened to Mandata.
这里虽然有两个国王，但是这个两个国王之间他们的经历非常的相似，所以我们这里要讲的公案还是主要讲这个自主龙王的公案。
So anyways, Mandata was a king who became extremely powerful after inheriting his father's kingdom. And he was known as a universal emperor, and that means that he was a ruler that is so powerful that he rules the continents. There are many continents. There are mainly 4 continents, 4 great continents where humans live. These 4 continents are there in the mandala offering that usually practitioners make. It is Budva Videha, Aparagodanya, Jambudvipa, and Uttara Kuru. So those are the 4 great continents. So this ruler was, this king was the ruler of all of the 4 continents where humans live.
这个自主轮王他是继承了他父亲的王位，他是可以说，他的权力非常的大，可以说是宇宙之王，因为他统治了就是人类所居住的4大洲，这4大洲也就是所有修行人曼扎所供养的地方。这4大洲分别就是东胜圣州、西牛货州、北俱泸州以及南瞻部州。
So this, because this king was a universal emperor, what we call a Chakravartin, or universal monarch, he had all of the 32 major signs, which we usually say of the Buddha, not exactly the same, but very similar to the Buddha's 32 major signs of a great being. This king had 1,000 children, 1,000 wheels, 1,000 elephants, and vast power over many beings.
那这个国王就是他有32种相好庄严，虽然跟佛陀的32相好庄严还是不能相比，但是有很多相似的相好庄严。然后他也有许多的他也有1000个孩子，1000个1000个大臣等等许多的福德。
And in the kingdom of the king, in this king's kingdom, in his kingdom, there were about 500 meditators of a non-Buddhist sect. And one day there were many birds flying above them, and this sort of disturbed their meditation, and which angered the non-Buddhist heretics. And so they made an evil wish, and that the wings of all of the birds would become diseased, and the birds would lose the ability to fly.
但是这个国王当时那个国王那个时候天上有一只鸟飞了过来，然后当时那个鸟就在国王的头上，就是掉下了不净物，然后当时国王就非常的生气，然后就是发下了一个恶愿。
And because of that, because they made that dark wish of prayer, all of the birds lost the ability to fly, and they had to walk on the ground.
但是因为国王所发下的恶愿，这一些鸟都失去了飞行的能力，都要在地上行走。
And when the king happened to know of this, he inquired what had happened, how did this happen? And he was told that it was the work of the meditators, that they had made this dark wish against the birds, and that is why the birds lost the ability to fly. And so when the king heard of this, the king decided that there should not be such evil people with evil thoughts within his kingdom. So he sort of issued a proclamation by banishing them, banishing all of the 500 non-Buddhist heretics from his kingdom. But the thing was that the king was so powerful that most of the places in the universe were all under his rule. So therefore, there was not really much places for the heretics to go to, and not any kind of real place for them to go to exile. So the only place that they could go to was on the slopes of Mount Sumeru, which is the highest mountain according to the Buddhist cosmology.
但是因为这个 国王看到了这一些鸟都在地上行走的时候，国王就问说是谁发了，是什么样导致这样的情况？然后当时就说是这500位仙人当中的发了这样的恶愿，然后国王就非常的生气，说不应该有人要发这样的恶愿，应该要把他们遣除。但是因为这个自如龙王他非常的有权利，他统治了所有的地方，所以基本上没有一个地方能够把他们遣除出去。所以后来这些发了恶愿的这个仙人，他们就住在了须弥山的脚下。
And now this king happened to possess such great merit that whatever he wished for could materialize. Whatever he wished for could just appear suddenly and materialize. It will just be there right at the moment that he wishes for it.
因为这个国王他非常的厉害，所以他不管是心里发什么样的愿，他发的这个愿都会实现。
And so one day, the king, seeing that there would be great prosperity in the land if everyone had plenty of grain to eat, the king then prayed that may grain fall from the sky. And right at the moment, right when he made that prayer, a great rain of grain of many different kinds of grain fell from the sky. And due to that, the people of his kingdom became curious to know from whose merit whose merit sort of caused this great rain of grain to fall in the kingdom.
当时这个国王就是他看到了他看到了所有的人都就是都有食物吃的时候，然后这个国王就发下了一个愿，希望这些食物都从天而降。然后他发下了这个愿之后的话，确实是有像如雨一般的谷物从天而降。然后当时这些臣民就非常的好奇，是因为谁的福德，就是因为谁的福德而导致这些谷物从天而降。然后他们在这样想了之后，他们之后才知道这些是因为这个国王的福德。
And they then wondered whether the rain of grain had fallen due to their own merit or due to the merit of the king. And so they asked the king, from whose merit did this rain of grain fall? But the king did not respond immediately. They asked this question several times. And then right around that time, the king made another wish he made a wish that may a great rain of jewels fall onto the grounds of the palace, and may only coins fall outside of the palace.
当时这些臣民就看到了从天上掉下来的谷物的时候，他们想这些是因为他们自己的福德，还是因为国王的福德？所以他们就在不同的场合问了国王，国王当时没有回答。后来国王又许了另外一个愿，希望天上有如雨一般的珠宝一样降临，然后只是降临在我的城池之外。然后在这个国王他发下了这样愿了之后，确实是有许许多多的珍宝从天而降。
And then after that, the king then finally told them that it was a great mistake on their part to think that the rain of grain had fallen due to their merit. And it was due to that improper way of thinking on their part that the jewels fell only throughout the kingdom and only coins outside of the palace. So therefore, in any case, in the end, he gave away the jewels. So this is just an example of how powerful he was, how he could materialize whatever he wished for.
当时因为国王的发愿是愿珠宝只降临在国王的宫殿当中，而只是钱财降临在宫殿之外。然后后来国王就告诉这些居民，他们觉得这些的福德是因为他们自己的福德是错误的。这是因为这就是为什么只有珠宝降临在这个国王的宫殿当中，只有钱财降临在宫殿之外。但是不管怎么样，这个国王之后还是把这些珠宝都给了这些臣民。
And also from time to time, this king would ask his subjects whether there were any parts in the world or in the universe which were not under his control. And whenever they told him that there were such and such places in the universe which are not under your control, he would then go conquer all of them.
后来这个国王就是会问他的眷属有哪些这个国家这个世界当中哪些地方还是没有在受他的统治之下，不管其他的人跟他说了什么样的地方，他就马上去了这个地方，并统领了这个地方。
And not only did he conquer all of the lands in the universe, but he also went to the great oceans where there were kingdoms of the Nagas or the serpent type of beings. And he conquered all of their places, all of the oceans as well. And he went as far as to Mount Sumeru and conquered all of that and the heavenly realms around Sumeru and above Sumeru.
不光光是不同的大地被这个国王所占领，后来他也到了海洋当中，或者是到了其他的国王，比如说是一个叫纳迦人的那种部洲的一个国王，等等，然后不管他到什么地方，他都把那些国王，他都把那些地方都占领。后来他也来到了须弥山，也就是纳迦人所住的地方，也把那些地方都占领了。
And when he was making such conquests, most of the time, the people of other kingdoms or beings of other kingdoms put up strong resistance. So then, therefore, the king Mandata made a wish that whoever fought him would have to run away. And because his merit was so great, that exactly happened. Whoever fought him did eventually have to run away from him.
因为当时这个国王在占领这些地方的时候，受到了许多的反抗，这个国王就许了一个愿，不管是谁和他反抗的话，这些人都最后会逃走，因为这个国王的福德非常的巨大，所有和这个国王所反抗的人，最后确实都逃走了。
And so this king then went on to conquer all of the lower heavens, and then he went up eventually to the higher heavens, such as the 33, heaven of 33, where the king of the gods, known as Indra, also known as Sakra, lives. And because this king Mandata was so powerful, Sakra offered his throne, half of his throne, to King Mandata. So they shared the throne together.
后来这个国王他就是占领了整个须弥山的底下的那些部分，以及在33天以下的天界。后来他来到了33天，也就是帝释天所住的地方，然后帝释天也分给了，也把这个权杖的一半分给了这个国王。
But then eventually, the king Mandata started to become not content. He was not content with what he had. Even though he was the great ruler of all of the continents and many of the heavens, and of course all of the Naga kingdoms and all of that, he was still not content. And he then thought that he was more powerful than Sakra, the king of the gods, and that he could just easily completely take over Sakra's seat, and just so the throne of Sakra, which is the throne of the king of the gods, could all be his, and his alone. So when he had such thoughts, when he harbored such thoughts, then by that he had accumulated a lot of bad merit, because Sakra is a great being with immense merit. And when Mandata thought that he was more powerful than Sakra, and because he was not content with what he had, and also because he was very proud, then that created a lot of bad karma for him. And due to that, King Mandata fell down from the throne of Sakra down to the low realms.
后来，这个自如龙王他也还是并没有感到满足，因为他觉得他比帝释王还要权力大，他想要占有帝释王 他想要占有帝释王全部的王位，在这个过程当中也积累了，因为这样的贪心也积累了许多的恶业，因为他觉得自己比帝释王更加的厉害，产生了许多的傲慢心，以此恶业的话，这个自如轮王就福报耗尽，就堕在了地上。
So because he had harbored such thoughts towards Indra that had created so much bad karma for him that all of his good karma got used up right at that moment, and therefore he fell down to the lower states and in a very poor state, and he was on the verge of dying.
因为他对这个第十天，他升起了如此的傲慢心，升起了如此就没有满足的心，积累了许多的恶业。在这样子升起这个念头的时候，他的福报就耗尽，就堕在了地上，以及差点死去。
And at that time, the people then asked the once King Mandata, how did such a great king like yourself, how should they tell the future generations or other people, how should they explain how such a great king like Mandata, who was so powerful, fell into such a poor state? And when they asked Mandata that, Mandata replied by telling them that you should tell them that that this all happened because I was not satisfied with what I had. I was not satisfied with all the wealth and power that I had, and so therefore I fell from such a state.
但是周围的人就问他，就是对于以后的人来说，应该怎么样跟其他的人说这么伟大的一个国王是怎么死去的？他就告诉其他的人说，应该要告诉要告诉其他的人，他现在这样的结果都是因为他没有满足心，不管他有多大的权利，都是因为他没有满足心。
So this King Mandata was one of the previous lives of Lord Buddha Shakyamuni.
那这个国王是佛陀以前的前世的之一。
And when later on, when Shakyamuni Buddha appeared in the world, and Shakyamuni Buddha himself told this story, which I just taught to his own disciples, they asked the Buddha, they asked him, how did you in the past become such a great, powerful emperor, universal emperor?
后来佛陀出世之后，有人就问佛陀，他当时是怎么样变成一个这么有权力的宇宙的一个宇宙王？
And to that, the Buddha replied that in the past, this was, of course, as Buddha speaking now, before Mandata was born, the Buddha's previous life, one of the previous lives before he was born as Mandata. There was a Buddha in this world, and this one Buddha passed by Mandata's previous lives. And when that happened, Mandata in his previous life threw 5 grains of pea seeds in that Buddha's direction. And when he threw 5 grains toward that Buddha's direction, 4 of the 5 seeds landed in the Buddha's bowl, the Buddha's begging bowl. And one of the seeds landed on the edge of the bowl. So 4 inside the bowl, 1 on the edge of the bowl.
当时佛陀就回答说，当时是因为在佛陀前世就是作为自如轮王的时候，当时的古佛就是在现在佛陀出世之前，以前的一位佛陀在世的时候，当时那一位当时佛陀在经过这个当时的佛经过的时候，就是自如轮王的前世的时候，他向那个佛的方向扔了5粒豆种，其中4粒这个豆种掉到了之前的古佛的钵里，其中一个豆骨掉到了这个钵的边缘。
And because 4 of the grains landed inside the baking bowl, due to that good karma, later on when he became Mandata, he became the ruler of 4 of the continents, the 4 of the great continents. And because 1 of the grains landed on the edge of the Buddha's baking bowl, due to that karma, auspicious connection or condition, later when he became Mandata, he became, he sort of gained, as I mentioned earlier, half the power over the heaven of the 33, because he got to sit on Sakra's throne.
那四粒掉在佛陀的钵里的那四粒豆种的这个供养的这个功德，使得后来他转生为自如轮王的时候，拥有了掌权四大洲的福德。那一个掉在了钵的边缘的那个豆种，使得他后来能够得到第十天半个的权位。
So this small part, which I just mentioned, of the begging bowl, related to the begging bowl, making offerings to the begging bowl, from what we can understand from this is that there's great results that can occur from making offerings to the Buddha. Just by making offerings of 5 grains to the Buddha into the begging bowl of his. Later on, he became a ruler known as Mandata, who was so powerful that he became the ruler of the 4 great continents, the heavens, and the Naga realms, and all of that. So that was just a one-time offering he made of 5 grains to the Buddha. So if we, as common sentient beings, can make, usually continually make offerings to the Buddha, then there's no doubt that there will be great results. So we can understand that from this. But the main moral of the story is to not be the main moral of the story is to be content with what you have, to not like want too much more than what you have, but be satisfied with what you have.
这里就是说，因为这个供养的福德，使得后来他转生为自如轮王的时候，就是有了能够掌权4大洲，以及掌权大家人州，以及掌权半个第10天的这个福德。当然，这里这个最主要想表达的意思，不只是说积累福德，而是说我们不能有吝啬心。但是我们积累，如果说我们能够供养佛陀的话，或者是我们能够进行供养的话，也能够使我们积累许多的福德。最主要的还是我们不能申请吝啬心。
So this story also tells you of how, no matter how powerful you are, no matter how great things are going for you, when you're not content, when you're not satisfied with what you have, everything can be ruined.
这里还有就是要表达的，就是说不管我们有多权力的话，不管我们有多少的权利，或者是说不管事情有多好，但是我们如果心里没有满足心的话，这一切也都会被我们毁坏。
So as it says, the moment they conceived the intention, still I must seize the entire wealth of Sakra, the king of gods, Indra. Their marriage was exhausted and they fell to earth. So this is as I mentioned earlier.
这里就是像我们前面所说的，这个自如轮王，因为他没有满足心，还想夺取玉帝的所有权财，在升起这样的念头的时候，福德就耗尽，就堕在了地上。
We can go to the next slide now.
我们现在可以看下一页。
The antidote to the result. So owing to the cause, attachment to material things, the result of stinginess arises. So as I mentioned earlier, when there's the cause, which is attachment to material things, from that, then stinginess arises. And so we already identified the cause, which is attachment to material things. We also already identified the antidote to that, which is to be content with what you have. That is the direct antidote to the attachment to material things. So now, this is in case there was the cause, which is attachment to material things, but one was not able to bring in the antidote, which is being content. So it is too late to bring that up, and due to that cause, the result, stinginess, has now arisen. So
due to attachment to material things, stinginess has already arisen in this case. So if that has arisen, doesn't mean that it's too late and there's nothing that one can do. So if that question pops up, then there's a reply to that it is not too late still, because there's also an antidote to the result.
我们前面讲了这个，就我们前面讲的这个因以及这个对因的这个对峙，那就是说这个因就是我们对财物的执着，那对这个因的对峙就是要么升起有满足心，我们之前讲了这个因是执着的话，那它的对峙就是我们要升起满足心。那如果在满足心没有升起的话，那就会产生这个因，也就是会产生对财物的执着。那有了这个对财物的执着的话，就会有果报，也就是会有吝啬心。那但是如果一旦有了这个果报，有了吝啬心的话，那也不是太晚，还是有对治的方法。
And so the antidote that can dispel this is generosity. So what that means is that earlier, so now the reader might think, so this is it, this is what it means. The reader might think now that, okay, the antidote to material things, which is the cause, is being content. But then what is the antidote to the result of being attached to material things, which is stinginess? What is the antidote to that? And the reply to that is that the antidote to the result, which is stinginess, is to practice generosity.
那这里我们就会想，那我们前面讲了对这个因的对峙，就是对财务的执着的对峙，就是要升起满足心。那如果说没有这个满足心的话，就会有果报，就是会有吝啬心。那吝啬心的话，就是它就是因为我们之前对财务没有满足的心，会产生这样子的吝啬心。那这样子的话，我们在思考，那对治这个吝啬心的对治是什么呢？那就是布施。
And as it says here, there are 3 classes of generous acts, as explained in the questions of Upali Sutra. These are the generosity practiced by a bodhisattva who has taken monastic ordination, the generosity of a lay bodhisattva, and the generosity of the advanced bodhisattva who has attained fearless patience toward the birthless factors of existence, or dharmas. So what this means is that now in order to practice generosity, or dana, Sanskrit, there are 3 types of generosity, three types of generosity practiced by 3 different types of practitioners. And this was taught in the sutra known as the Questions of Upali Sutra, because this sutra, the person who requested the sutra was one of the Buddha's disciples known as Upali, and he asked many questions in the sutra, and the Buddha gave many replies. So therefore, the name of the sutra is known as Questions of Upali Sutra. And in that sutra, it was taught that there are 3 different types of generosity. One type of generosity which is to be practiced by bodhisattvas who are monks or nuns. And then the second type of generosity is to be practiced by bodhisattvas who are lay people, male or female. And then the third type of generosity is to be practiced by advanced bodhisattvas, which means enlightened bodhisattvas, bodhisattvas who have attained the Arya stage.
那这里对吝啬心的果报的对治，就是要行持布施。那这里行持布施就是有3种不同形式的布施，在这个优婆离请问经当中都有详细的讲。这个优婆离就是佛陀的大弟子之一，他问了佛陀许多的问题，佛陀也做了解答，所以这一部经就叫优婆离请问经。那在这个当中就讲了3种不同的布施，一个是出家菩萨的布施，也就是僧众尼的布施；第2个是在家菩萨，也就是男女僧众的布施；第3个就是证悟的菩萨的布施，也就是证悟圣者地的菩萨的布施。
And the last type, advanced bodhisattva who has attained fearless patience toward the birthless factors of existence. What that means is that we see this word fearless patience toward the birthless factors of existence. So that may sound confusing a bit, but that means that it means the bodhisattvas first of all, we should understand that the emptiness we know, and we have heard about emptiness, and many of us might fear emptiness because we don't really understand it correctly. We have, usually we just like would rather think that everything exists as we see things. We're not welcome to seeing something different. When the Buddha says that everything is emptiness, or such as in the Heart Sutra, that emptiness is form, form is emptiness, and so on, that sounds confusing, and we're not too comfortable with accepting that or opening up to this new concept or idea that everything is emptiness. But for the enlightened bodhisattvas, they have directly perceived the nature of emptiness. So therefore, they are not afraid of emptiness anymore. We are kind of, in most cases, afraid of it. They are not afraid of it anymore. So therefore, fearless patience towards the birthless factors of existence. Birthless factors of existence can be understood as emptiness. So fearless patience toward the birthless factors of existence means the bodhisattvas who are not afraid of emptiness anymore because they have directly perceived emptiness.
这个第三个布施的，就是说是得证悟者的布施。这里的得证悟者的，就是指已经证悟空性的菩萨的布施。那我们现在反复人的话，我们所认知的这个世界，都是我们现在所看到的这个样子。我们不是很容易去接受佛菩萨所说的空性的境界。就比如说在心经当中所说的色即是空，空即是色等等的这样子空性的观念，我们做反复地并不是那么容易去接受。但是对于证悟空性的菩萨来说，他们直接限量的现证了空性，他们在现证了空性之后的话，就不会害怕空性，不会像我们现在这样畏惧空性。所以就是说这里所说的证得无生法忍的菩萨，也就是可以把这里的无生法忍也可以就是解释为证为空性的菩萨。
So anyways, there are three types of generosities, classes of practicing generosity based on the three different types of practitioners.
所以就是说这里有3种不同的布施，是根据不同的程度、不同的菩萨的来讲的3种不同的布施。
So we can go to the next slide.
咱们看下一页。
The generosity to be practiced by an ordained bodhisattva mainly entails the giving of fearlessness, love, and religious teaching. So now we are speaking here about the bodhisattva. It is a bodhisattva. All of the earlier three mentioned practitioners are all bodhisattvas, but there are different types. The first one which we are going to speak of here is those who have also the bodhisattvas who have received the ordination vows, who are monks and nuns who have shaven their heads and keep all of the Vinaya vows, the Vinaya rules that the Buddha laid out, and who wear either yellow robes or red robes, maroon, or things like the robes like that kind of color. And also it can be any kind, with basically all of the monks and nuns in Buddhism who are bodhisattvas.
这首先我们讲菩萨出家，就是菩萨出家的布施，这里就主要有无畏布施、慈悲布施和法的布施等3种。我们这里要所说的布施的话，都是指菩萨的布施，只不过是不同的种类。就好像我们前面讲的，菩萨有出家菩萨、在家菩萨以及得证悟者的菩萨的布施。这里所讲的就是出家菩萨的布施，也就是说是僧众和僧众尼，也就是所有剃度以及有学佛陀所讲的有手持以及学习佛陀所讲的戒律的，以及穿红黄僧袍或者其他颜色，也就是指所有的僧众尼的布施。
So as it was mentioned here, there are 3 types of generosities for the ordained bodhisattva to practice. And actually there are 4. It is the giving of, it is the giving of fearlessness, the giving of love, the giving of religious teaching, and the giving of material things, the 4th one. But among these 4, the main practice of generosity which the ordained Bodhisattva should practice is the giving of fearlessness, love, and religious teaching, and not mainly the giving of material things.
对于出家菩萨的布施的话有4种，但是最主要的布施是前面的3种，也就是无畏布施、慈悲布施和法的布施。但对于出家菩萨的来说的话，财物的布施不是最主要的。
So first we should understand what is the giving of fearlessness. So an example of that would be, for example, that a king or ruler punishes a subject and like gives them the death penalty, or like a penalty of like going to beat them or give them and make them suffer in many ways. So that is an example. In that case, if the ordained Bodhisattva saves them from that by talking to the king and making the king change his mind, and making that person the subject, helping the subject to avoid such a situation, not have to undergo to such suffering, then that is the giving of fearlessness. Basically, the ordained Bodhisattva is saving them from suffering.
第一个无畏布施的话，就举例来说，比如说一个国王要惩罚他的仆人，比如说这个国王要去殴打、折磨，让这个仆人受苦的话，那这个作为出家菩萨的话，他们去救护这个受苦的仆人，或者是他们去和国王和国王去打交道，使国王改变他们的想法，不让这个仆人受苦的话，那这样子就是这个出家菩萨他就是出面去救护了这个受苦的这个仆人。
And then also some other examples is if someone is afraid of thieves or bandits, or also afraid of armies, and these are like examples relevant to all times. And then also afraid of the harms done by water, like the damages done by water and the like. And if the ordained Bodhisattva saves them from such fears through the Bodhisattva's protection, because the Bodhisattva shares with them his or her protection and prayers, then by doing that, the ordained Bodhisattva has given the generosity of fearlessness.
或者比如说一般常人所畏惧的不同的情况，比如说军队，或者是比如说水灾引起的痛苦等等，那这样子的话，这些出家菩萨他们去救护这些人不管是直接去救护，或者是用祈祷文去帮助这些人的话，这些都是出家菩萨所行使的无畏布施。
Then the second is the giving of love. So what that means is that an example of that would be in order for someone to be happy, to experience happiness in this lifetime, if the ordained Bodhisattva gives lessons to that person, gives good advice to that person, and makes that person practice good deeds to their body, speech, and mind. If the Bodhisattva makes them follow a virtuous path, with hopes that that person will be happy due to that, then the Bodhisattva has practiced the giving of love.
第二个慈悲布施的话，就举例来说，比如说，这些出家菩萨，他们想让一些人在今生当中所感到快乐，这样子的话，去和他们教法，给他们提一些建议，让他们在3门去行持善法，就是去行善，希望他们从这个行善当中能够获得快乐。那这样子的话，这些出家菩萨就是行使了慈悲布施。
And also, if the ordained Bodhisattva makes any person follow the path, the virtuous path, which will lead to rebirth in the higher realms and eventually to enlightenment, if the Bodhisattva makes them follow such paths, then that is also the practice of giving love.
或者是这一些出家菩萨让这些人去行善，通过以此行善的方法，希望他们以后能够转身到善趣，或者是以此的话能够获得正悟，这样子也是行持慈悲布施。
And if the ordained Bodhisattva without any wrong motivation and with a good motivation, and if not that, at least if the ordained Bodhisattva teaches the Buddha Dharma, the Buddha's teaching in a correct manner to others, then that is the practice of giving religious teaching, basically giving teachings. Giving teachings or teaching, when the ordained Bodhisattvas teach in the correct way, then that is also a form of practice of the generosity, and this is the giving of religious teaching.
或者这些出家菩萨，他们没有以不对的发心，就是以正确的发心去正确的教法，通过教法的方法，通过这个教法的话，通过正确的教法也是一个慈悲布施的一种方法。
On the giving of material things, the Buddha taught that ordained people could give ink, pens, and paper, but he did not teach that they should nurture others to the giving of wealth in a big way. So when it comes to the ordained bodhisattvas practicing giving material things, the Buddha generally told that they do not need to give much, but they should, what they can give when it comes to giving material things is ink, pens, which we can understand as pens or pencils, and also paper, which are sort of the stuff which can help others or the student to study the Buddha Dharma. These can come in useful for them to study the Buddha Dharma. But other than that, other than the giving of ink, pens, and paper, the Buddha told them that they should not, the monks, ordained bodhisattvas, and not just ordained bodhisattvas, but also monks in generally, Buddha Hinayana Mayana, should not give material things in a big way. They should not give anything like big other than that, such as money or whatever kind of great riches there are.
财布施主要就是指布施墨水、笔和纸而已，就是指，出家菩萨可以布施一些笔墨，可以布施一些铅笔，或者是钢笔，或者是纸张，这样子来帮助别人能够学习佛法。但是作为僧众的话，不应该给布施许多的其他的过多的财物，比如说布施钱财等等。
We can go to the next slide.
我看下一页。
Yet the Lord Buddha too, in previous lives, when he was a layman, was with such positions as king, minister, householder, or merchant, did practice the generous giving of material things. And when he was a bodhisattva in his final existence during his childhood as Prince Siddhartha, when playing, he used to give others the things he possessed. Later, when he ordained himself by the bank of the Naranjana River, he sent his horse and jewelry back to his very wealthy father, Suddhodana. So what it is saying is that in the previous lives of the Buddha, when he was at times a layman, at times a king, ministers and householder or merchant, which were all laymen, lives which he took, which were laymen, he practiced the generous giving of material things on a great scale. And even in his final existence, what it means is it says here, when he was a bodhisattva in his final existence, what that means is a bodhisattva who is taking their life, who has taken their final life and will not take any further lives, any further rebirths, because in this final lifetime, they will become free from samsara. They will attain enlightenment. So that is what it means by a bodhisattva in its final existence. And Prince Siddhartha was a bodhisattva in his final existence because in that very lifetime, as Prince Siddhartha, he became Lord Buddha Shakyamuni. So therefore, he's a bodhisattva in his final existence. And so even when he became Prince Siddhartha in the present life, when he was still a prince, and when he was playing, when he was young, he used to give riches and wealth to others, which he himself possessed. But later on, when he ordained himself by the bank of the Naranjana River, when he cut his hair close to when he had arrived at the Naranjana River, he sent his horse, who's named Kantaka, and all of the jewelry which the horse was wearing, as well as which he himself was wearing, had come wearing as a prince. He took off all of that jewelry, put it on the horse, and sent the horse back to his father Suddhodana.
佛陀在曾经做国王、大臣、施主、商人，做过财务布施，在菩萨最后有的时候，曾经少年嬉戏时就布施其他财物，其他所有的财物。这里这里的最后有，菩萨的最后有就是指菩萨在证悟佛陀之前的最后一世的转世，也就是在这一世之后，菩萨就不会再转世，这一生之后就会脱离轮回。那对于佛陀来说的话，佛陀的最后一世转世就是悉达多太子，在悉达多太子的那一世之后，佛陀就证悟了我们现在所知道的释迦牟尼佛的这个果位。那就算是当时是悉达多太子在作为王子的时候，在他少年玩耍的时候，他也给其他人布施过钱财。但是佛陀后来在尼连禅河边剃度出家了之后，他把他的马以及把他自己所用的装饰等都归还给了他的父亲，就净饭王。
Let me go to the next slide.
咱们看下一页。
Also, when the farmer's daughter Sujata offered him food in a golden vessel, he returned the golden vessel to the girl. When she offered it again, requesting that he accept it out of compassion for her, he took it and then cast it into the waters of the Naranjana. Because of this, some Tritakas even considered that Gautama was bad with wealth, saying it would have been more suitable to give the horse and jewelry to the poor than to the king, since the king did not lack for wealth, and to not give the golden vessel to the poor, but to throw it into the river was a waste. So, as we mentioned, when when the Buddha in his previous lives as king, merchant, householder, and the like, in all of his lives in which he was a layman, he gave out many great wealth to the poor and to anyone who needed it. And even when he became Prince Siddhartha, while he was still at the palace, he gave out wealth to anyone who needed, including the poor. But when he ordained himself, he sent back his horse and his jewelry back to his father, King Suddhodana. While he could have given it, some people think, many of the non-Buddhist practitioners or followers known as Tiptakas of India, they say that Gautama was not good with wealth because instead of, Gautama could have given the horse and his wealth to the poor. Why did he need to send it back to his father, who was already very rich? And also when Gautama Buddha was, when Siddhartha, you could say, was practicing austerities in the forest for 6 years. And after that, at the end of 6 years, the lady Sujata offered him yogurt in a golden vessel, in a golden container. And along with the yogurt, she also offered the golden vessel to the Buddha. But he did not accept the golden vessel and returned it back to her, saying that he does not need it. And then she offered it again to him, saying that please accept it out of great compassion for me. And then he finally took it, but then he did not keep it for himself yet. He threw it into the river. He threw it into the Naranjana River. So many saying that Buddha is not good with wealth. He wasn't very smart with how he dealt with the wealth. He could have given it to the poor who really needed it and could have benefited from the wealth.
那佛陀在前世就是做过国王、大臣、施主、商人，就是国王，对不起，对佛陀是在家人的时候，佛陀在家人的时候也给过穷人布施过很多的钱财，就算是在最后一世，就是在最后有的那一世，在悉达多太子那一世的时候，也是布施了许多的钱财。 但是佛陀在出家之后的话，却把自己的马以及把自己的装饰，都送回给了自己的父亲。当时外道就觉得佛陀也贪财，因为这一些钱财、这些马可以布施给穷人，但是却把这一些却把这一些给了已经非常富有的父亲。为什么会这样做？当时佛陀在森林当中苦行6年的时候，当时这个妙生女供养佛陀，以金碗供养佛陀酸奶，以及把这个金碗也供养给佛陀的时候，佛陀也都没有接受。后来这个妙生女都多次祈请佛陀，祈请佛陀为了慈悲他而接受他的供养。后来佛陀接受了供养之后，却把这个金碗扔到了尼连禅河里。当时有一些外道就会想，佛陀对这个财物的做法以及分配的方法也不对，就是这个分配的方法也不聪明，因为应该把这一些钱财布施给需要的穷人。
We can go to the next slide.
我们看下一页。
What the Lord Buddha had in mind when doing so was that if you give the highest kind of wealth to a recipient who is not of the highest sort, though that inferior recipient may benefit slightly in his physical circumstances in this life, ultimately he will go to the lower realms because he is unable to make good use of that wealth. Hence, it is not right for a Bodhisattva to create a caste that will send a poor person to the lower realms. So what he's saying is that the reason why the Buddha, after he had become ordained, did not give the horse and the jewelry as well as the golden vessel, which Sujata offered to him, to the poor, was that when the Buddha became ordained, he became a being of the highest sort. He had renounced the world and sort of like was seeking enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And so therefore now he, unlike before, he was a being with great power, sort of like a great status already, someone that is worshipped by all of the gods, supposed to be worshipped by all of the gods and humans.
之所以佛陀没有把马装饰品以及金碗布施给穷人的时候，穷人的原因，就是因为在佛陀出家之后，佛陀证得了果位之后，佛陀就成为了最殊胜的对境，也就是为了所有的众生而获得了而希求证悟而获得了果位。在获得了果位之后，佛陀就变成了所有天人以及人的殊胜的应供处。
So therefore, because he was already of the highest kind of beings that there were, if he had given the great wealth that he had, such as the horse, the golden vessel, and the jewelry, to a recipient who was not the highest sort, which means like a poor person, if he had given it to a poor person, the poor person, the inferior recipient, we would say, could actually benefit from it slightly for a short time, but ultimately in the end that poor person will end up being reborn in the lower realms because that person will not be able to put good use of the wealth which the Buddha had given to him.
如果当时佛陀把这些钱财给了那些穷人的话，因为佛陀是最殊胜的应供处，而这一些穷人的话，他们并不是他们没有这个福报去承受，所以就算把这一些钱财布施给了他们的话，他们确实有可能会获得略微的好处，但是最终就会使他们堕入恶趣，就是因为他们不会把这个钱财去如法的去使用。
And so therefore, when the Buddha had sent it back, he sent back the horse and the jewelry to his father, who was sort of like the rightful owner of the horse and jewelry. And when the father, because it's his own wealth, first of all, and also the father is a person with great merit as well, because he's a king. So he wouldn't have accumulated any negative deeds based on after having received the horse and the jewelry back. So therefore, the Buddha sent it back to the safe place where he could send it. Because as we mentioned earlier, if he had sent it to a poor person, they would not get used to it and would be reborn in the lower realms due to that. And also, the Buddha did not give the golden vessel or the golden container which Sujata gave offered to him to any poor person, but rather took it down into the Naranjana River, where the Naga king living there received it. And the Naga king is also a person or being with great merit. So is that Naga king was the recipient for that. It's not an inferior recipient. So the Buddha gave it to them, to that being. So that is the reason why. And it is in the interest of not sending the poor or inferior recipient to the lower realms that the Buddha did not give such great wealth to the poor people.
所以佛陀就把他的马以及他的装饰品，就是交还给了他的父亲，因为他的父亲本身就是这些财物的主人，而且他的父亲自己也有许多的钱财，自己也有许多的福德，不会因为得到了这些马、这些装饰品之后去造恶业，就是佛陀就是把这些钱财返回了一个安全处。那佛陀他没有把那个妙身女供养给他的金碗供养分享布施给穷人，而是把它扔到了尼连禅河里的话，那就是因为这个扔到了河里之后，这个金碗就被那迦王所拥有。那迦王也是非常有福德的人，也不是像有那个那迦王也不是也不是非也不是没有福报的，也不是没有福报的受布施的对境，所以就是把这个今晚给了这个那迦王，也不会使他造业。
And it's not just the Mahayana, but also in the Hinayana tradition, it is said that if the ordained monks or nuns give the materials which they use for the living to lay people, then there's great fault in doing so. It is a great mistake to do that.
不光是大乘佛教这样说，小乘佛教也认为，作为出家菩萨，作为出家僧众，如果把自己的物品给了在家人的话，也是有许多的过失。
And also it is said that if the highest type of being, a person, gives something which they use for their livelihood to one of the lower type of beings, the lowest or the lower type of beings, inferior being, then that becomes a impure giving. It will be a giving, but it will be impure type of giving, not a pure giving.
还有就是比如说轮回当中轮回当中，如果是一个如果是一个比如说是一个善趣的一个轮回的众生，给了一个恶趣的轮回的众生的话，就是说是一个好的一个转生处，给了一个不好的转生处的话，那这个布施也就是一个不清净的布施。
And what's more, it is said that if the Bodhisattva who meditates gives their materials which they keep and is useful for their meditation to students who are studying, people who are just casually studying, then that is one of the root downfalls of a bodhisattva.
还有就是说，如果菩萨把自己如果一个修禅定、修禅修的菩萨，把自己平时为了禅修当中所使用的一些东西，给了一个只是随意只是非常随便修行的人的话，那这对菩萨来说，是一个根本的堕罪。
We can go to the next slide.
让我们看下一页。
Indeed, if an ordained person fosters others by great acts of generosity, this will be an obstacle to his or her own learning, to his or her own learning, reflection, and realization to meditation. Hence, the Buddha taught that an ordained person should not be attached to material things, and that it is the ordained person who fosters others, and not through generosity, but through moral discipline, meditative absorption, and wisdom, who accords with the doctrine of the Buddha. So it is therefore said that if the ordained persons, a monk or nun, gives great wealth to others, then that will cause obstacles to their own studying, the hearing, contemplation, and meditation.
如果出家人用财物布施的话，就会成为文思修的障碍。所以出家人不应该以财物来作为布施，而应该以持戒、禅定、智慧等来布施，这样才更符合出家人的布施。这里就是说，如果作为出家人的话，以财物来布施的话，这样就会给自己的修行所带来许多的障碍。
So therefore, what the monks or ordained community should be doing is, it says here, hence the Buddha taught that an ordained person should not be attached to material things. They should certainly not be attached to any type of material things. And what they should not be doing also is that the ordained person who fosters others, who takes care of others, should not take care of them through generosity of giving, material things, but they should take care of others through moral discipline, the practice of moral discipline, meditative absorption, which is basically meditation, and wisdom, which accords with the doctrine of the Buddha, wisdom which is in accordance with what the Buddha taught, understanding what the Buddha taught.
那出家人的话本身就不应该对财物有执着心。那对于出家人来说的话，应该布施的应该是使用以持戒、禅定、智慧等来布施。那智慧的话，就是要理解佛陀所教的法，这样子来布施才是符合出家人的布施。
So basically what this means is that monks and nuns should not give others great material wealth, but then what is their job? The job of the ordained community is to mainly practice moral discipline, meditative absorption, and wisdom, and is not mainly to give to others. So that is not their job, and is not expected of the ordained community to do that, to give great wealth to others. To mainly, in this case, we are speaking of giving it to the lay people.
这里的就说出家人不应该布施钱财，他们的工作应该是修持戒、禅定以及智慧了。他们的工作就是不是给在家人布施财物，而是应该要给在家人要布施持戒、禅定、智慧等等来利益在家人。
And as mentioned above, if an ordained person fosters others by great acts of generosity, this will be an obstacle to his or her learning, reflection, and realization through meditation. And one may wonder, how is that? How is it an obstacle? Because the way it is an obstacle is because ordained people, when they study, reflect, and meditate and the like, they need to be very focused. They need to be in a secluded place, expected to be in a secluded place, and focus on their own practice. And when they get involved with giving great wealth to others, first of all, it was told that the lay people are not recipients to receive great wealth from a greater being than them, which is the ordained community. And on top of that, when the ordained community gets involved with giving things to others, then they will not be able to focus on their practices. I mean, the main practices which the Buddha told them to focus on, which is hearing, reflection, and meditation. So it becomes a distraction from the main practice, which they're supposed to be doing. So that is why and how it becomes an obstacle to their main practice. So therefore, the monks and nuns are not expected to give in great quantity.
如果出家人布施钱财的话，就会变成他们文思修的障碍。那这里那怎么样？这些布施钱财会导致出家人的文思修带来障碍？那就是出家人的话，应该是专注于自己的修行，应该到寂静的地方专注自己的修行。如果就是出家人不应该去布施钱财。如果出家人卷入了给在家人布施钱财的话，首先第一个，在家人不是受出家人布施钱财的布施处。第二个就是说，如果出家人融入了布施钱财的话，就是不能够专注自己的修行。那佛陀所教的修行，主要就是要文思修这个3大方面。如果出家人卷入了布施钱财的话，就会干扰自己的修行，没有办法专注。
We can go to the next slide.
好，我们看下一页。
Therefore, in the sutras, the Buddha taught that the monks can give only the food remaining in their begging bowls and do not teach the giving of other things. So it says here, therefore, because of the earlier mentioned reasons, the Buddha said and told to his monks that what they should give to others on top of the giving of ink, pens, and paper if they need to, is that they may also give the remaining food in their begging bowl. So they first will go around begging for food, they receive the food and they'll eat the food. And if there are any remaining food, they may give that to others as sort of like blessings. And it is a small sort of generosity which is allowed. But they should not give anything more than that, other than that, like money or wealth or jewelry or things like that. They should not do that. The reason why, as it says here, though ordained people are suitable recipients of offerings and worship from the entire world, including the gods, they are not donors. The main reason why, so it all comes down to this point. Ordained people, which are monks and nuns, are suitable recipients. They're suitable people to receive the offerings and worship from the entire world, including the gods. So the ordained people are an object for all of the world, including the gods, to make offerings and make their worship to. And they are the recipients, and they are not the donors, which means that the ordained monks are not supposed to be the sponsors, but they are the recipients, the people who are to receive the offerings, not the people who are to give the offerings to others. They are not the donors or sponsors.
这里之前我们说的就是就是佛说就是出家菩萨就是尊重不应该给钱财。如果要布施的话，钱财那也只能够布施笔和墨水等等。那这里的话还有就是说剩余的可以布施的，就是只能够布施自己钵里所剩下的食物，作为一种加持，那可以布施。其他的就不应该给在家人分更多的钱财、珠宝等等。那这里这一切我们刚才讲了那么多，最主要的就是说，因为出家人本应该是天等一切的供养处，并不是施主。那也就是说，出家人是一切的是殊胜的福田，是应供处，是包括天人等一切都应该供养的应供处。那大家出家人的话就是应供处，而不是施主。
Consequently, if you reverse the positions of donor and religious teacher, this will be the causes of famines and other deteriorations of conditions in the world. So, as it is saying, the monks and nuns are the recipients, and the lay people are the sponsors or donors. That is the job of each of them. The monks and nuns will, of course, give the other type of giving, such as love, fearlessness, and the teaching. But it's not really to give the material wealth. That is not their work, and is not what they should be doing. And on the lay people's part, their work is to mainly support the ordained monastic community by the giving of material wealth. As by doing that, they will, on their part, the lay people's part, they will be accumulating a great deal of merit, because they are offering it to a great recipient. They are an inferior sort of recipient, I guess you would say, while the ordained community are a greater recipient. So, and that is how the system in the world, that is the system of how things should be. Now, if you reverse the positions of donor and religious teacher and make the lay people the recipients, and the monastic monks, the monks and nuns, the donors or the sponsors, if you mix up both of their positions, then that sort of you've mixed up the system of how things should be, and due to that karmic sort of we call it dendel, or condition, interdependent connection or conditions. Due to that, there will be famines, epidemics, pandemics, and also many bad things and difficult problems arising in the world. So one of the causes is if you reverse the positions and expect the lay people to receive things from the monks and nuns, and for the monks and nuns to be the giver of great wealth. So this is something to keep in mind.
这就是说，如果说就是在家人应该是要供养给出家人的，而出家人不应该是不应该去去布施钱财，这不是在家人的这不是出家人的工作，这也不是出家人应该去所行持的。作为在家人的话，我们应该向出家人做供养，这样子的话，我们自己也可以积累福德。那我们作为在家人的话，我们因为是不是殊胜的受布施处，所以如果说我们的职位和出家人的职位颠倒了的话，也就是说我们去受出家人的我们受出家人的钱财的话，那这样子的话，就是我们变成了得钱财的人，而出家人是布施钱给钱财人的话，这样子的话就会导致世界上许多的饥馑的因，比如说因为以这样子不好的缘起的话，就会导致世界上有许多的难题，比如说饥荒等一切的灾难。
So we will leave it here, and in the next class we will then continue with the generosity of the lay person Bodhisattva, the lay Bodhisattva.
我们今天布施讲到这里，我们下一节课讲对于在家人的布施的行为。
So now we will go to the 37 practices of Bodhisattva.
然后我们现在讲37佛子颂。
Amada labe lala chaza lo gezo chudre yonsu suba le leze tambo kuye ribon. Nyebe jinzo le dolo rabdo ze changju semye jombe wekaraji. Dulja lingshi wina nambara yo taye shenden kurgi mangalachi. Tuje chimbo gaden geba keba podo jungwe yende nye. 인제 백가라 챙와 레제 베체레세와 무슨나 원하신 가래 최대 게세 제바 라도 룰레 토베 샤블라 데베 켈라 담베 데베 라도 고네 데세 멘토제 불베게와 메도 중완 근경 게세 제라네 바라쇼
The Buddha taught that the unendurable suffering of the lower realms is the fruit of unvirtuous actions. Therefore, to never act unvirtuously, even at the cost of one's life, is the practice of a bodhisattva. So as it says very clearly, the Buddha taught that the reason why we endure many sufferings in the lower realms, which is the animal, the hungry ghost realm, and the hell realms, many beings endure sufferings there is because of the causes which they have accumulated, which is unvirtuous or negative deeds. So when we perform bad deeds, negative deeds, then as a result, we must endure suffering in the lower realms. And so therefore, the main practice of a bodhisattva is to avoid accumulating negative deeds, even at the cost of one's life. If someone makes you accumulate negative deeds, and like if it is a life and death threat, like if it is a threat that if you do not accumulate negative deeds, if you don't do something bad, I will kill you, or I will make your family suffer, or I will do this and that, I will harm you in this and this kind of way. Even in such a way, if the Bodhisattva still does not act unvirtuously, if the Bodhisattva still is able to avoid accumulating negative deeds, avoid performing bad deeds, then that is the practice of a Bodhisattva.
这个佛子行三十七颂的第一句里面就是说佛说难忍恶趣苦，皆为恶业之果报。这里就是说我们之所以受三恶趣的苦，就是地狱恶鬼和旁生的痛苦的话，都是因为我们以前往昔所造的所积的恶业以及不善业。一旦积了这样子的恶业的话，就会使我们在恶趣当中受苦。那菩萨行的话，就是一定要远离这一些造作恶业以及受三恶趣的痛苦，就算是付出生命的代价的话，就算是生命受到威胁，比如说有人威胁我们，如果不这样做的话，会对我们的家人如何如何，就算受这样子的威胁的话，我们还是要坚持不造恶业。
For this, there is an example in Tibet at the place called Yu. It is sort of like a state in Tibet, Yu. In India, there's a small country called Be. So in the country called Be, in the state known as Yu, there was a monk. And one day this monk returned to his home to be with his parents.
这里讲一个公案，就是在藏地有一个叫玉的一个州，这里面有个地方叫北，然后其中有一个僧众，他有回到他的家里。
And when this monk had returned, his parents gave him some household works to do. They had a field, and so they told him that right now there's no one who can look after the field. We're kind of busy, so how about you look after the field? And make sure that the deers, it seems to be a place where there are many deers, make sure that the deers do not eat the crops from the field. So they told him that and sent him to the field.
但是这个出家人，他的父母就给了他一些家活让他去做，就让他去看管家里的田地。父母说，因为没有人有去看管这块田地，那就交给你来看管这块田地。那这个田地里面有许多的鹿，然后这个父母就让他看好这些鹿，不要去让这个鹿去吃这些庄稼。
And so the monk went to the field and rested there for some time, and then eventually he got very tired and fell asleep on the field. And meanwhile, while he was asleep, many deers came, a great group of deers came and ate all of the crops while he was asleep. And they ate so many crops that the deers themselves fell asleep on the field. They got so full and they fell asleep, and they got so full that they could not stand up anymore. They were so full that they just fell asleep and could not stand up.
但是这个僧众他到了这个田地当中，他看了一会儿这个田地的时候，自己就睡着了。但他睡着了之后，这许许多多的鹿就到了这个田地当中，这些鹿就吃了许许多多的谷物，吃的多到这些鹿都非常非常的饱，然后饱到自己都这些鹿都站不起来，就倒在田地当中就睡着了。
And then eventually the monk woke up, and when he woke up, he saw so many fat deers laying on the ground sleeping.
后来这个僧人他醒来之后，他就看到了有许许多多的鹿躺在这个田里。
And when he saw that, he became very alarmed, and because he had not done done his job right, he was not able to avoid that from happening, which was what his parents warned him from. So he then got up and told them to wake up. He tried to wake the deers up and to get them off the field, but the deers would not move. They were so full and were asleep. And then the monk sort of used his robe and sort of like touched nudged the deers with his robes a little bit, trying to wake them up
当时这个僧人他醒来之后，看到这个场景的时候，就突然一下变得非常的惊醒，然后他想要去尝试把这些鹿叫醒，但这些鹿因为吃的非常的饱，就就是非常的熟睡，一点都动不了。然后这个僧人他就想要用他的袍子去挪这些鹿。
So in the end, and still, the Jews do not wake up. They do not move. They do not budge. So then, finally the monk sang a song to the Jews, and he said the song sort of went something like, "You Jews of the country known as Bear, if you keep on acting in this way, if you keep on being like this, don't wish for a long life. You're lucky that you met me." So what that sort of means is that he's telling the Jews that if you keep on acting like this, in this way, you should not hope for long life, because if it was someone else had caught you in this state, they would have killed you or could have beaten you up and made you suffer. But you're lucky that you at least met me, and I'm not going to harm you. So that is sort of like the meaning of what he sang.
后来这个僧人他不管是用了什么方法，这些鹿还是纹丝不动。后来这个僧人他就唱了一首歌，这个歌的词意就是说，你们这个背的这个地方的这些鹿王，你们再这样子不动的话，你们就是不要你们就是你们就是不要祈愿长寿，你们应该感到非常幸运，你们现在碰到的是我。这意思就是说，这些鹿如果再这样子酣睡不动的话，他们就不能许愿他们能够活得长寿，因为如果是其他人看到这样场景的话，就会要去打这些鹿，让这些鹿受苦但是因为现在遇到的是这个僧人，这个僧人就不会这样做。
Because it is very possible if it was someone else who was there other than the monk, and if they had caught the deer, they could have beaten the deer, they could have threw some rocks or sticks at the deer, they could have chased the deer, they could have called other townspeople to come, the village people to come and to chase the deer away. They could have killed the deer, they could have done anything to harm the deer, but it was the monk who was there, and they were lucky too that they had met the monk, and the monk was not going to harm them in any way. So likewise, from this example, we should learn that when you are a bodhisattva, the work of a bodhisattva is to never harm any single sentient being in any way, and the main thing is to not accumulate any negative deeds at all. And that is the practice of a bodhisattva.
如果是其他的人看到这些鹿这样子酣睡的话，你一定会要去打这些鹿，或者是用石头去扔这些鹿，或者是去追赶他们，或者打电话给其他村落的人去帮他们去追赶这些鹿等等，或者做其他的方式去伤害这些鹿。但这些鹿非常就是应该非常幸运，现在遇到的是这个僧人，这个僧人就不会去伤害这些鹿，也不会做任何其他的去伤害这些鹿的事情。那这里最主要的就是说，作为佛子行的话，最主要的就是不能伤害众生，还有就是最主要的，也就是不能够造恶业。
So as aspiring bodhisattvas, we should learn from that monk's example of non-violence and also in not accumulating any negative deeds.
所以作为佛子的行呢，所以作为佛子的话，我们应该向那个僧人学习，就是我们要做就是我们要做无害以及做不伤害众生。
Okay.
我们今天讲到这里。So there's a question that one wonders if one reads, recites the mantras and practices the practice of his or her own deities, how would he or her know that they have retained or they have they have obtained the result of the practice? How would they be able to know that they have accomplished the practice?
Well, main thing is that sign of progress is if one's devotion is not decreasing but rather increasing, if one's loving kindness and compassion is increasing, if one's wisdom, if one seems to be getting closer to understanding the nature of the nature of emptiness is increasing. If all of those occur, then it is a sign that your practice is going well. If it is decreasing, it may be a sign that it is not going as well. And then also, of course, if you, when mainly directly related to the practice of Yidam deity, if you are able to remember your Yidam deity at all times and not forgetting the deity, if your trust in the Yidam is not weakened by any kind of circumstance, and if you're able to remember the Yidam deity, and of course, when it comes to Yidam practice, mainly if you are able to, this varies, of course, if it is of the lower tantras, if you're able to remember the deity as a higher being than oneself, if it is of the higher tantras, if you're able to meditate as yourself as the Yidam deity, and you're not able, and that pride as being the Yidam deity does not diminish, then those are all good signs that the practice is effective and is working for you.
这个问题是问，就是如果自己持咒修行本尊，怎么样能够知道自己相应的果报？那法王子回答说，如果我们自己觉得自己的信心、慈悲心以及智慧越来越增上，智慧的话就是觉得自己对真我空性的见解越来越接近的话，这一切都是说明我们对修持这个本尊的话，就是有相应的果报。但是如果相反的话，那就是说我们就是之前讲的那些都没有增上，反而减少的话，就不是一个相应的果报。那还有一个就是说，如果我们能够一直意念我们的本尊，就不管是什么样的情况下都不忘记我们的本尊，都一直意念我们的本尊的话，也是非常重要的一点。比如说我们可以意念本尊是比我们殊胜的对境，或者在密宗当中自己就观想自己是本尊。
And directly related, an answer directly to the question about the mantras is that the mantra is, of course, a verbal action. So if you happen to recite more mantras than talking idle gossip on nonsense kind of things from your mouth, if you kind of, if you recite more mantras than more kind of useless things, saying out useless things which are hardly of benefit to oneself or others, then that is a good sign that the power of mantra is effective. And also, of course, if there's any effect from the power of reciting the mantra on your mind, if there seems to be, like, by reciting mantras, if your mind is being benefited from that, if your mind becomes more calm, peaceful, more concentrated, and filled with more faith, and that kind of, those are all good signs that it is working for you. The practice is working for you.
Thank you. 还有一个更直接的一个知道我们有没有修成相应的果报的方法，就是我们当念诵咒语的时候，我们是用我们的嘴用语言来念诵咒语。那但是我们如果念诵咒语的时候夹杂了很多其他闲杂的语言，说了许多闲杂的废话的话，那这样子的话，我们这个念诵的这些咒语，因为就是我们念的越多的话，我们说了很多的杂语，那杂语也说的越多，这样子的话，念诵的咒语就不能帮助自己或者帮助他人。那如果我们或者是从另一个角度说，我们这个念诵咒语的时候是用心耳去念的话，这样一心专注的话，就是我们如果说心能够感到平静，感觉到寂静，更加有专注力，对就是信心也增上的话，那这也是一个获得果报的一个现象。There's a question that wonders, sometimes Turku or Rinpoche give material gifts to lay students. Is this a consequence or bad karma?
This can get a little complicated. Usually, as we just based on what we had just gone through, it is not really appropriate for monks and nuns to give gifts to the ordained, as it was very clear we just went through. And many people these days, in fact, demand sometimes the monks and nuns to give. We say that monks and nuns are so rich, the lamas, tukus are so rich, and why they're using all their wealth on the monasteries and making fancy temples and not giving to the poor and the like. So in that way, first of all, it's almost as if there is a mistake on both sides, but it's still complicated. But just to go through a little bit in that, monks and nuns are generally not supposed to keep great wealth, as we already went through. And also, it is not right for the lay people to expect monks and nuns to give them wealth. So first of all, if you can translate that.
这个问题就是问，如果说有些时候仁波切给学生一些礼物的话，那这个有没有一些过失，或者是有没有一些恶业？反而子说这个问题就是有一点复杂，我们就分几步来说。就刚才我们讲的那些内容的话，就总体来说，僧众确实是不能给在家人财物，但是也有许多人会要求，就比如说喇嘛或者是仁波切给我们就觉得他们那么的有钱，造了那么多华丽、那么多漂亮的庙，为什么不把这些钱财拿来去布施？这个问题就是有点复杂，就是双方都有错。首先第一个，作为出家人来说的话，就首先就不应该积累钱财。那对于在家人的角度来说，在家人也不应该去要求出家人去布施钱财。
But then in certain circumstances, every sentient being has different karmas. Right now, earlier, it was mainly spoken, what we went through today is like generally speaking. But then each particular sentient being has their different needs. They can be benefited in different ways. And sometimes if a lama who is a monk or nun gives a material offering, a gift to the disciple who is a lay person, and the disciple can still be benefited if there's if the teacher themselves have really looked into it before giving the gift. If they have looked into it and are very sure that the disciple will benefit from it more than harmed from it, then it should be allowed in special cases to give such gifts, I believe.
对于有些情况来说的话，虽然就是说，不同的人有不同的业力。虽然说从广的方面来，从广的角度来说的话，确实是就是出家人不应该给在家人钱财，但是也有一些人确实是能够从喇嘛或者是从仁波切当中获得的钱财当中或者是从喇嘛给的礼物当中能够获得一些利益。这个条件是，如果这个给的出家人或者给的喇嘛在非常详细的观察了之后，他认为给这个礼物或者给这个钱财的利益大过于过患的话，那只是在一个特定情况下，如果有详细的观察能够利益在家人的情况下，才可以给。
Then that type of usually we don't see much monks and nuns, lamas who are monks and nuns giving like great amounts of money to their disciples. It's mostly the other way around. Mostly we find whether if the lama does give, is a big giver to others and his disciples, they mostly give supports for Dharma practice, such as statues or Dharma textbooks, or just sort of instruments or things that will support the Vajrayana practitioner in the Dharma practice. And of course, on top of that, Dharma teaching, which is the religious teaching, which we mentioned earlier. So I think that there's not too much of a danger in that, but generally speaking, the monks and nuns, the lamas who are monks and nuns, should not give great wealth to their disciples, as that sort of mix up the system of how things should be.
就是有一些情况下的话，我们确实也就刚才讲的那个看到喇嘛给在家的一些礼物，但是总体来说的话，我们不太见到出家人给在家人就是庞大的钱财。一般来说的话，在家人出家人如果给在家人的话，也是给一些，比如说是像佛像啊、佛经、法器等等这一些，或者是给在家人讲法。 不太会看到出家人给在家人大笔的钱财，而是应该是在家人去供养出家人。因为如果出家人给在家人大笔的钱财的话，就好像我们前面有讲到，就是会覆天颠倒，就会产生这样子的问题。There's a question that wonders, one really wishes to have a Dharma teacher, and he or she wonders how should he or she pray in order for him or her to meet a Dharma teacher that can guide his or her practices.
Well, of course, it is very good if the person who does not have a Dharma teacher wishes to meet with the Dharma teacher. That is always something that one should aspire for. But the disciple should not only just pray. Praying alone will not help too much in getting to meet the Dharma teacher. Of course, you need to pray, but many causes and conditions need to come together to meet the Dharma teacher, and a good Dharma teacher, of course. So not just praying constantly to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that one may meet a good teacher, but also one needs to make the search. One needs to investigate the many teachers that are out there in the world. And based on their the way they act, their teachings, and the like, one should investigate whether they are genuine Dharma teachers or not genuine Dharma teacher. And then if they're genuine Dharma teachers, then one may follow them if one is finally sure that it is safe to follow them. As we mentioned earlier in one of the earlier chapters, when it comes to the Dharma teacher, it should be a Dharma teacher who knows, who has compassion towards the disciples, who has a wish to benefit them. The teacher himself should have great compassion, should have great learning, should have great faith, should be well versed in teaching the Dharma, in sharing the Dharma with others and the like. So those are some of the qualities which the teacher should have. So one should search and look and see who has such qualities, and then eventually one will find someone. And that is the way to find Dharma teachers. But and if one is more lucky than that, then sometimes one will have a dream in which one's Yidam deity, the tutelary deities, the destined deity, will tell you who you should go to, which Dharma teacher you should follow. But that is also kind of rare. And if that happens for you, that is great. But if that doesn't happen, you need to search for the teacher yourself.
问题是问，就是弟子想要有一位禅修导师，怎么样祈祷才能够出现？房子就是说，如果有这个愿望的话，是非常的好，应该就是我们作为弟子的话，就是应该要有这样子的愿望。但是不光光是要有这样子的祈愿，就是说，就是我们要就是就是如果是持这样的祈愿的话，就不会有太大的帮助，因为就是要因缘具足的话，才会有就是具德的上师会出现。就是不只是我们要自己要祈愿三宝，我们还要积极的去搜，就是去寻找现在在世有哪一些上师我们可以依止。那我依止的话，就是我们之前几课里面也讲过，就是我们要依止的这些具德的上师，就是他们要行为要如法，他们自己要有教法，就是自己有研究佛法，等等，这样子的话才能被称为一个是正士。那如果是而且的话，作为我们要依止的对境的话，这个上师就是自己要有智慧，要有慈悲心，要有愿意帮助众生的心，以及自己也要有学习佛法，对三宝有信心，以及有教法，以及能够传授这些教法。这样子的话才能够就是作为我们能够依止的一个上师。然后我们如果这样子去搜到这样子的一个上师的话，就可以依止。那更幸运的一种方法就是我们有很少的情况下会做一个梦，在梦中的话，我们的主尊就会告诉我们哪一个是我们要依止的上师，但这种情况是非常少见的。This question asks to see all sentient beings as Buddha And in case one sees other people practicing non-virtuous deeds or doing non-virtuous things, should one still call them out, or should one still talk about it, or should one just reflect on one's own mind to reflect on one's own thoughts?
For beginners, you're not really at the time to call out to others on others' faults, because you yourself are full of faults to start with. So, and you need to deal with your own faults before helping others. You need to. It will be a great joke if you point out others' faults while you have the same kind of faults yourself. So, to point out others' faults, you need to be free of those faults first on your own part. So until you are free from your own faults, then you should not point it out to others, but rather work on your own faults. You can look at them, see their faults, and get the hint or learn the lesson, and that it is very possible to you to do that, for you yourself to end up doing that, and how you should avoid that. You'll see the faults by watching others and seeing how they, due to the negative emotions, they accumulate negative deeds. By watching how that happens, you will learn a lot from that, and you'll learn of the faults of having negative emotions and the faults resulting from that, which is suffering. So that will help you to avoid that. So you should first work on your own faults.
这个问题问的是，关于一切众生为佛，看到别人的行为不如法，还要去说吗？还是应该反观自心？反王子说，作为初学者的话，我们不能去说别人的过失，因为我们自己身上也有许多的过错。我们应该先对治自己身上的过错。如果说我们自己身上都有许多的过错，还去指别人的过错的话，这是一个非常大的一个玩笑。所以我们在看到了别人如果有不如法的行为的话，在看了之后，也要提醒自己，也很有可能会犯这样的错。同时，我们在看到别人的过错的时候，也会意识到他们是怎么样产生恶念，由这个恶念又导致他们造了什么样的恶业。在这样子看到的时候，我们自己会学到很多，我们就会学到这样子的恶念的话，怎么样会使我们造恶业，造了这样子恶业的话，又会使我们受怎么样的苦。所以，作为初学者的话，最重要的还是首先要改自己身上的错误。
Otherwise, like if you yourself have lots of faults and negative emotions in your mind, you see someone else performing negative deeds, and you try to go to them and point out their faults, then they will, of course, not be patient with you. They will lash back and fight with you. You can be physically or verbally, and then because your mind is unstable and filled with negative thoughts, you will become angry. You'll fight back physically or verbally, and that will end up happening most likely. And then things will get ugly from there. So therefore, it is better to avoid such situations of, going out to them and pointing out their faults when you're on the beginner stage.
我们自己身上也有过错的话，如果还去指到别人的过错的话，我们如果一旦指出别人的过错的话，那别人也会变得非常的不耐烦，会对我们狡辩。那别人对我们狡辩的话，我们自己的现在的心还是那么的不安定，自己的心里有许多的杂念，有许多的烦恼。别人在和我们辩论的时候，那我们也会止不住的想要去说回别人，或者想要去说服别人。这样子的话，我们就会有可能会和别人争吵，等等，就会导致许多的麻烦。所以的话，作为初学者的话，最重要的还是要对治自己的过错。This question wonders, so a couple really wants to have a baby boy and would like him to be ordinated in the future to benefit all sentient beings. What is a correct way to pray for that?
wishing for that itself is the correct way to pray for that. It is not really that too complicated as long as they wish that they can send their future child to become a monk, then that itself, and for that monk to bring benefit to others, then that itself is the correct way to pray for that. So you just need to continue wishing like that.
这个问题是问，就是弟子的夫妻想怀一个男佛子，将来出家弘法利生，怎么样如法的祈求？法王子说，如果有这样子的愿的话，就是如法的请求；就是如果有这样子的愿望的话，那就继续这样子祈愿。这样子的话，就是这样子，就是如法的祈愿。
Now you just need to wish for that, and then later on, once the baby is born, then you can just go to a monastery and to put that child in the care of a good teacher, a monk, of course, a monk or nun. If it is a boy, it will be a monk. So to send him to a monastery to a good teacher, and that's what one needs to do. So it is almost similar to the aspiration and application bodhicitta. In the beginning, you need to wish, then eventually you need to do the action, which is sending the child to the monastery. So it's simple as that.
房子说，就是我们先要有这样子的祈愿，然后这样祈愿之后，如果那这个小孩生下来之后的话，把他就带到寺庙里，就交给一个僧人照顾，交给一个老师照顾。那所以这样子的话，就好像我们之前讲的愿菩提心和行菩提心一样，首先是这样子发愿，然后这样子发愿以后，这小孩生下来之后的话，再去做这个行为，就是把小孩带到庙里，然后交给一个僧人照顾，然后交给一个老师照顾。So this is a request. Wonders because he or she really likes the Dharma teaching that Rinpoche is giving right now. He or she wonders if we can have this class once a week instead of twice a week, as twice a week is too long.
It was quite difficult earlier. I also had received this request earlier, some days ago, about a week ago, to make it once a week. But although I am currently in the US, I took this time to sort of mainly to focus on my own personal practices a bit, because usually in India I study more than practice. But right now I try to take this time more to focus on practice than study, although I try to do both at the same time. So, and also I have other commitments at the moment to the Sakya Monastery in Seattle, and then also to another center in Vietnam. So other teaching commitments, but I'll still think about if it would be possible to make it once a week, but I cannot say for sure yet.
这个是说，就是觉得2周的课程有点长，能不能1周1次？法王子说，之前也收到过这样的就是祈愿，就是能不能1周讲1次这个课？法王子说，他现在虽然回到了美国西雅图，但是他还是花了很多时间，就是自己修行。之前在印度的时候花了许多的时间，就是在学习上，现在在西雅图就是花时间在修行上。但是除了这个的话，就法王子在就是还是学习和修行2个都做。除了这2个以外的话，对美国的萨迦寺以及在越南的寺院也有其他的事情要行事，但是法王子还是会想一下之后能不能1周1次。This question wonders how to turn greed, anger, and ignorance to pure awareness.
That would be mostly a practice of Vajrayana, if you want to speak of that, because you transform all the faults into something that is pure. In the Mahayana path, we don't have that. In the causal vehicle path, which is the path which is the clarifying the seeker's intent, which this book is speaking of, is based on. That path does not speak of that. The Hinayana and causal path, Mahayana, do not speak of such practices. If it's Hinayana, you just try to get rid of the fault directly. If it's Mahayana, you accept that it is a fault and you don't transform it, but you bring the antidote to deal with it. Then in Vajrayana, you bring greed, hatred, and all that. You transform it into something which is pure. So therefore, that I probably cannot say here right now. And since that is a Vajrayana practice, and one will need to receive Vajrayana teachings in order to practice in that way.
这个问题是问，就是如何将强烈的贪嗔痴转化为清明的觉知。房子说，这个是密宗的修法，就是直接把这个贪嗔痴转为清明的觉知。这里就是显宗里面没有这样的说法。我们现在讲的这个牟尼密显明论也是属于显宗。对小乘佛教的话，是直接就是摆脱这个。摆脱这个痛苦，就是摆脱这个三毒。作为显宗的话，就是我们去接受这个痛苦，并且用对治的方法去对治。那在密宗里面的话，就是讲怎么样把这个三毒转为就是把它转为清净。那现在的话就不是讲这个密宗的时候。And there's a question wonders, what are some of the ways to learn Tibetan well?
That will be one should take classes from a Tibetan teacher, a good speaking Tibetan teacher, a native Tibetan teacher. It can be online classes or learn directly from them, step by step, starting from the alphabet, the vowels, and all of that. And then that will be a good starting point. And then also one should hang around with a lot of Tibetans often and speak more Tibetan rather than your own home language, whether it be Chinese or English. Then in that way it can get better.
这个问题问用什么方法学好藏文？法王子说，这个就是要上藏语课，就是要跟本地的藏人上藏语课，不管是线上还是线下，从字母开始学起，从元音开始学起，然后之后的话就是要多和藏人交往，要比自己的母语还要多的说藏语。This question wonders for beginners using the logic of the middle way to understand there is no difference between the Dharma and oneself, and how can that person use his practices to better cultivate the state of understanding there's no difference between emptiness and light.
Yeah, I think you mean the combination of clarity and emptiness, right?
Oh yes, yeah, clarity and emptiness, yeah.
Yeah, so that is first one needs to know what is emptiness. One needs to do the investigation. For that, there are good textbooks such as the Chandrakirti's Middle Way, Entry into the Middle Way. And also there's the 9th chapter, I believe, of the Bodhisattva10 by Shantideva, which speaks on the emptiness view. So first one should learn those. Without learning the emptiness view, one will not know what emptiness is. So there's nothing really much one can meditate on. So one should first learn that. And then that usually clarity and emptiness, the union of that is the sort of, we say Salvasem Kitsenyi, Dongbasem Girashin, Saldo Sunju Jodal. So Salvasem Kitsenyi means clarity is the definition of the mind. Emptiness is the nature of the mind. The clarity and emptiness is inseparable, and that inseparability is inexpressible. So that is usually how we would meditate on that union. So clarity is sort of like our mind. It should be meditated on the mind based on, we're speaking of the mind when we say clarity, the union of clarity and emptiness. Our mind is empty. Our mind, the nature of our mind is emptiness. If we try to pinpoint mind, we cannot find mind. But yet it is alive. Something is there, and that is the clarity. And that clarity and emptiness is inseparable. And that inseparability is inexpressible. So that is a way to meditate it. But first one needs to understand the nature of emptiness. And for that, those studies we will come eventually come to the lessons on the nature of emptiness in during the level of the perfection of wisdom.
So what's the second textbook besides the Entry into the Middle Way, please?
So Entering into the Middle Way was by Chandrakirti, and the second one is by Shantideva, The Way of the Bodhisattva. In there, one of the chapters, one of the last chapters, the 9th chapter, is the chapter on wisdom, and that is dedicated to emptiness.
Okay, thank you. 这个问题是问，就是初学者利用中观推理了知人法二无我当中怎么样修行更有利于升起明空无二境界。唐子说，就是要了解这个空性的话，首先就是要学习月称认识的入中论以及寂天菩萨的入行论，特别是入行论当中的智慧品。那这个明空无二的话，这个明就是这个明是意识的定义，这个空是这个意识的本性。那也就是说，这个意识的本性其实是找不到的，那也就是空。但是这个空但它这个意识虽然是空，但它也是有所存在。这个存在就是明，所以这样子的话就是明空无二。那这个无二又是无可说的，所以的话就是这四句的话，就是我们要在证悟了空性之后的话，要在修行当中反复的去思维。And this question asks about she has held the 8 Mahayana precepts yesterday, but she had a fight with her husband yesterday, and did she break one of the precepts? And throughout her practices, her mind always feels very afflictive, and there's a lot of obstacles occurring. And so what are some of the ways that can better help the Dharma to emerge into her mind and to practice Dharma better?
Regardless of whether she has broken a precept or not, the main thing is that as long as she feels a little guilt about it, and just as long as she feels guilt about what she has done, that is good enough. First of all, that's a good starting point. Because if you don't feel guilt about it at all, then the negative deeds will increase. But if you feel guilt about it, then that kind of stops it from increasing. And then on top of that, if you need to also the guilt, or you could say remorse. So on top of that, remorse or guilt, if you are able to confess the negative deeds, then it becomes purified. And for that, there are many ways one can purify the negative deeds. One can recite the Bodhisattva mantra. One can recite sutras, such as the 35, the confession of the 35 Buddha Sutra and the like. One can recite such sutras, and certainly one's the sort of negative deeds will be purified. And also the sutras related to the Bodhisattva Siddhi Garbha and Akasha Garbha and the like, one can recite such sutras.
Sorry, what's the name of the sutra that one should recite? What are the last two names again?
The Siddhi Garbha and Akasha Garbha sutras, those one can recite. The Bodhisattva Siddhi Garbha, and they have their own sutras. I think they're quite famous in China. And then also there's the 35 confession sutra, the confession to the 35 Buddhas. There's that sutra which one can recite as well. And then of course the Bodhisattva mantra.
这个问题是问，就是手持八关斋戒的时候，和老公生的气是不是犯了罪？然后以及学佛的时候心里很乱，怎么样佛法融入心？法王子说，就是关于这个是不是毁坏了戒律的话，就是如果说，在吵架之后的话，如果心里就是感觉到了有一点罪恶感的话，那就很好。虽然说就是感觉到了罪恶感的话，但是就是一旦觉得的话，就不会再使这个罪恶增上。然后感觉到罪恶感的话，我们之后还要就是忏悔，忏悔的话就能够使我们的罪业忏悔清净。就忏悔的方式的话，就是比如说我们能够念诵百字明，或者是念诵35个忏悔文，或者是念诵地藏经等等来通过忏悔。
And the best way to make sure to sort of avoid these afflictive emotions from continuing is to take a good moment to reflect and see if whether if you let this afflictive emotion arise, and if you just follow it and sort of let it do what it wants, so whether it be anger or jealousy, if they continue, is there more harm or is there more benefit? You need to sort of weigh the two, if you see whether there's more benefit or harm. And if you find out in the end that it's not going to, by letting it grow, by following the thought process of the jealousy or anger or whatever, if it brings more harm to oneself and others, if it makes oneself unhappy in the end and also others unhappy, then it's not worth following it. It's not worth being angry, not worth being jealous and the like. And if you see, if you understand the faults, well, then you'll naturally not end up, continuing with that, continuing making the mistake. And if when you see the benefits of it, you'll avoid it. So therefore, you need to take a good time to reflect and weigh the benefits and the harms of following and letting these negative emotions arise.
关于这个佛法怎么样融入心的话，房子说就是我们自己要思考，如果说我们追随我们的这个三毒烦恼的话，带来的是恶业多，带来的还是利益多？如果说我们不去追随我们的这个烦恼的话，带来的是利益多，还是带来的是恶业多？那比如说，如果说我们追随我们的烦恼的话，那我们也会给自他带来不快乐。那这样子的话，就是非常的不值得。这样子知道了这个过患的话，我们就不会再去追随我们的烦恼。所以就是我们要花时间去思考，这样子追随烦恼是带来恶业多，还是带来利益多？This question wonders, so he or she has held the wishes to hold precepts for a month, but other Dharma sisters or brothers has organized going to circumvent a stupta. So he or she wonders, can they go and then come back to hold the precepts, or should he or she finish holding all the precepts before going, but because it's the auspicious month coming up, she didn't know what's the best option to choose.
Well, it depends what kind of precepts the person took.
这个问题是问，就是发愿了受1个月的这个书圣的，就是书圣愿受1个月的戒，但是要组织去转塔的话，那到底是先转塔还是回来再补受戒？法王子说这个要看受的是什么样的戒律。这个师兄之后可以回一下。
If the person just took the precepts of not killing and not lying and the like, and then they go to the stupa, and don't lie and don't kill, and then come back to the home and don't lie and don't kill, then they will have been keeping the precepts in anyways, either way. And even if but then if it's a precept for staying just at home, not talking to anyone, sort of like a fasting, almost a fasting ritual, where you don't talk to anyone, where you don't eat a certain food for a certain amount of time, then going out is not going to work out easily. So the different, many different kinds of precepts, and depending on that, it will vary. The situation will vary.
房子说就要看守的是什么样的戒律，就比如说，如果只是守不杀生、不偷盗的戒律的话，那就转了1个月的堂之后的话，这个戒律也不会破。但如果是受了，比如说不说话，或者是像节食这样的戒律的话，那最好还是就是先受好戒再去转堂。This question wonders if the monks or nuns can give Aquarius to lay practitioners as a blessing.
Give a what? Sorry.
Aquarius, so those blessing bottles that we see during the empowerment, for example.
That is fine.
That's fine, okay. 这个问题问出家人如果给加持宝瓶可以吗？房子说这个可以。
Those are not really any major gifts, and it is just sharing the blessings. It is not really any kind of major material wealth.
房子说这个就是因为这是一个加持品，不是就是庞大的钱财，所以可以。Similar question to that. This wonders if during festivals, if monks or nuns were to give out red pockets to lay practitioners, shouldn't we not accept it? And if we did accept it, will it cause, or would it be a cause for being poor?
Well, according to Saben, it would be a cause. And first of all, the monks should not be giving that out. But then in the first place, according to Sakya Pandita, and also based on the Indian Buddhist traditions, it's not really the work or job for a monk to give out money in the first place like that. So maybe it is better to not receive it if you can avoid that.
这个问题问，就是出家人在节日当中给在家人居士，是不是不应该接受？房子说，根据三家班智达这里讲的话，出家人本身就不应该给钱财。对于在印度的传统当中的话，也是就是出家人不应该给钱财，所以最好是不要拿。
But then again, this is mainly the Tibetan and Indian Buddhist tradition. And then Chinese Buddhism might have their own tradition and culture. So I would not really dare to tell Chinese to not follow their own culture if that is your culture and traditions of how it's been for a long time, for many centuries. So therefore, you should just try to see what's best on your own part.
房子说，当然这个还是在藏地以及在印度的传统，就是在汉地的话，房子也不敢说就是应该不应该怎么样，我们还是要自己去观察。This question wonders if lay practitioners meet a scammer or a liar, should they stay away from them, or should we educate them?
Well, in the spiritual viewpoint, it would be better to stay away from them and avoid them. Then in the worldly viewpoint, it's better. It would be considered good to catch them and to report to the police or do something like that. So it would be like you have to look at which one you consider more important, the worldly ways or the spiritual way. If it's spiritual way, you would just probably be patient. You would think that if you've been scammed, you accept it as your own negative karma, and be happy that maybe that due to that suffering of losing something or whatever, any hardships you go through, it's your negative deeds are being purified. You may also wish that scammer be a little happy, will obtain some happiness from whatever they just did, and will be happy and not experience suffering. So that would be a spiritual practice. But then in the worldly way, it is considered better to report to the police and make them suffer. So you should see which one would be better.
这个问题问的是，居士遇到骗子要远离他们，还是要教育他？法王子说，这个就是看我们要从出世间的角度讲，还是从世间的角度讲。如果从出世间的角度讲的话，我们要远离他们，或者是说，想自己，因为这个的话，就是遣除了以前造恶业的这个罪障而感到开心，就是这样子，他就清净了罪业，然后也希望这个骗子能够得到安乐。但从世间的角度来讲的话，我们也可能就是需要报警，就是还是要用世间的方法去处理。然后如果用世间方法处理的话，那就是如果报警的话，也可能会让骗子受苦等等。And this question wonders, so he or she has attended the 41st Sangha Chujin's empowerment that were given a couple of days ago for Parnasavari, Parnasavari, yes, and Simandan Avalokiteshvara, and because he or she has never received empowerment from 41st Sangha Chujin, so she wonders if she can meditate herself as the idam and to read the mantras.
Did they or did they not receive the empowerment from Sangha Chujin?
So before those two empowerments, they have never received Sangha Chujin's empowerment before. And they wondered if they can visualize themselves as the idams when reading the mantras.
Regardless of whether they have received any empowerments before that, if they have still received the Parnasavari and Avalokiteshvara empowerment from Sangha Chujin Rinpoche, they are allowed to practice the idam deity and recite the mantra. That is the whole point of receiving the empowerment. When you receive them, when the Lama bestows the empowerment, for example, when the Lama bestows the Parnasavari empowerment to the disciple receives the authority, receives the sort of permission to practice the deity of Parnasavari. Not all deities, but Parnasavari. If he gives the Avalokiteshvara empowerment, then the disciple is allowed to practice the Avalokiteshvara as the idam deity. And most of the empowerments that Sangha Chujin which gives online are called Jenang. So it is a sort of Jesunang. Jenang means Jesunangwa, which means sort of like giving the permission. And what that means is giving the permission for the disciple to practice. And when the Lama gives the Jenang, there's 3 Jenangs, Gui Jenang, Sungli Jenang, Tugi Jenang, which means the Jenang are giving the permission to practice the body, Sungli Jenang, which is giving the permission to practice the speech, and Tugi Jenang, which is giving the permission to practice the mind of the deity. So when the Lama gives the first Jenang, and all 3 are in one Jenang. So when Lama gives the first Gui Jenang, which is in the Parnasavari empowerment, the Jenang of the body, then the Lama gives the permission for the disciple to meditate on the Yidam's body. And when the Lama gives the speech Jenang, the disciple is then receives the permission to recite the mantra of the deity. And then when Lama gives the 3rd Jenang, which is the mind Jenang, then the disciple is allowed to meditate on to merge their mind with the wisdom mind of the deity.
这个问题问的是弟子参加 41人参加法王的这个业依佛母随喜灌顶以及狮子吼星座的随喜灌顶，但是之前没有参加过法王的灌顶，可不可以自己观想为本尊一体来念诵？法王说就是那个法王子说就是因为这个灌顶的话都是随喜灌顶，都是就这个灌顶的话就是一个开始的意思。这样子的开始的话，就是能够开始我们可以去修，可以去修，可以去念诵。所以不管在这个之前有没有得过灌顶，只要得了这个灌顶的话，就是我们就是开始我们可以去修这个本尊的三门，就是可以去就是给了我们的身语意的这个随许的灌顶，那这就是给了这开许的灌顶。那这样子的话，就是是这个身的开始的话，就是可以让我们去观察本尊的身；语的开始的话，就是可以让我们去念诵本尊的咒语；意的开始的话，就是可以让我们观想为和本尊融为一体。And in terms of the ways that he or she reads the mantra, should he or she read it while the ears listening and the mouth reading, reciting, or should it be visualizing the idam and visualizing the mantra, eliminating lights to bless oneself, or should he or she visualize reading the mantra on behalf of all the microorganisms in the body, but not focusing on the mantra itself?
It doesn't need to be strictly one of them. It can be either one of any of that. If it is mentioned very clearly in the sadhana or the practice manual that while reciting the mantra, visualize this and this, then one needs to visualize exactly that way. But otherwise, when one is just casually reciting mantras, one can visualize any one of those based on whatever one is comfortable.
这个问题的后半段就是问这个观想的方法，就是这个师兄给了三种不同的这个念诵这个咒语的时候应该如何观想。那法王子说这些的话都可以，就是除非我们得的一个观点当中，这个法本有具体的说观想的方法，那根据这个方法来观想。那如果没有的话，那就是我们自己在念诵的时候，根据自己想就是观想的方法都可以去这样的观想念诵。This question wonders how can one reassure oneself that one got the Bodhisattva vows?
Well, first of all, when one receives the Bodhisattva vows from the teacher, one will repeat after the teacher 3 times that I will generate the mind of enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So by the 3rd time one repeats, one needs to be very sure. One needs to be think that now I have surely received the Bodhisattva vows. At that moment, one needs to be very sure. If one is still very unsure, even after repeating 3 times after the Guru, then it is difficult to say one has received the Bodhisattva vows.
这个问题问就是怎么样确定自己得了菩萨戒的戒体？法王子说，就是我们在跟随善知识，就是念了3遍为度天下众生升起殊胜菩提心的这个寄颂，在念最后1遍的时候，如果心里非常的确定的话，那就能得菩萨戒的戒体。但就算念到了第3遍，但心里还是不确定的话，那就不一定得了菩萨戒的戒体。This question wonders how to help students who have depression and their parents are suffering a lot seeing their kids having depression. What are some of the ways that we can help them?
Some of the ways which we can help them is by practicing empathy. Empathy is we sort of try to view things how they view things, and we try to understand their suffering, and then we try to lend out our hands to them and let them know that we are there for them and to help them and to support them. So first we need to understand their suffering, understand their kind of situation very well, and then we lend out our support and let them know that they are not alone and they do not need to worry, and that there are loved ones, there are people who wish to help them and help them feel loved. And so that is the important thing that one can do on one's part.
这个问题问就是现在抑郁症的学生很多，有什么方法可以帮助他们？方子说，首先我们要有同理心，就是要以别人看问题的角度去理解一件事情，然后要去理解他们的痛苦，也要在他们在需要帮助的时候要去帮助他们，要非常理解他们的情况，他们的痛苦，也要让他们知道他们不是孤身一人，有人愿意去帮助他们。The other question was, there's a 4-year-old kid who has very severe diabetes. What are some of the ways that they can do to that's beneficial that can help the kid?
For diabetes, I'm not educated in the medical field, so I cannot really say much, but other than just like go to the doctor and do what the doctor says, take whatever medicine the doctor prescribes. But on the spiritual side, I could just say that do pujas related to the medicine Buddha or Dara or any thing that is the healing type of pujas for their sake, that could be beneficial.
这个问题问身边4岁的孩子患糖尿病很重，怎么样做才有效？房子说他自己对医学方面没有很深入的研究，就是要根据医生所说的来吃药，等等。但是从精神方面来讲的话，比如说做火供、做药师佛的火供、做度母的火供，就是一切有治愈的那些佛菩萨的那些火供，我们都可以去为他们做。This question wonders if one has committed a crime or a negative deed and has already confessed, then what are some of the ways that that can show that this negative deed has been purified?
If one has really confessed well with great regret, then it's most likely that one's mind will feel more at ease. One's mind will feel lighter, as if a great weight has been taken off one's shoulder. One will just feel that little lighter. I think that is could be a sign that it has been taken off, the kind of like the negative deed has been taken off of you.
这个问题问就是，自己犯了某个罪业，已经忏悔，或消除清净的具体特征是指什么？房子说，如果就是好好发心忏悔的话，那我们的意识、我们的精神应该感觉到，轻松一些，我们应该感觉到放松，感觉到轻快，就好像肩上卸下了重任的这种感觉。This question wonders if one's family member is against of practicing Buddhism and is very cold to oneself, and one has tried all kinds of ways to try to talk to them, but they have all failed. What are some of the ways that they can resolve this?
Then it's very difficult if you do not have the support of your parents. You'd either be running away, like Prince Siddhartha did, but then that is also not really a safe way to do things. So maybe it would just be to practice secretly, to not make a big deal about your practice, but just practice secretly if you can.
这个问题问就是家人反对学佛，然后遭受冷暴力，试过各种方法化解，最后都失败了。 房子说就是如果之前已经就是都试了很多的方法的话，还是没有用的话，那就是我们就是比如说我们可以偷偷的修法。This question wonders, as parents or as teachers, how can one raise a child with a pure view? Can one still scold or hit the kid when necessary?
The best is to avoid scolding or hitting. First of all, the parents should nurture the child in a good environment, a healthy environment, with love and care, with gentle words and the like. And still then, if the child does not listen, even with all of that being done for them, then a little scolding if necessary, and then a little bit, well, usually in the West, of course, the hitting is a big crime, but then in Asia, it is also normal to hit kids. And so I would not really say, me being here in America, I would not be comfortable to say to hit kids, but you can take certain measures to discipline them and do that, but only if really necessary, and if the child is too spoiled, is turning out to become too spoiled, too gentle methods.
这个问题问就是作为家长或者老师的话，怎么样亲近关去抚养小孩？需要打骂的时候可以显示愤怒相吗？房子说就是最好教小孩的时候，就是不要通过打骂的方式，就是还是要通过教导他们的方式。但是作为但是在亚洲的话，就是这个好像也是比较常见的。但是在北美的话，就是最好就是不能打骂小孩，但是就除了教育以外的话，就是只有在需要的时候才可以就是以这样的方式去教导小孩，但是主要还是通过其他的方式去教育小孩。
For me personally, the beating method was very effective because as a young child, I wasn't too naughty to start with, but I was still beaten anyways to become sort of like almost perfect. That was the teacher's sort of hopes. So for many years, I was beaten with very long sticks, and when that happened, it was very painful, but and not very pleasant at all. But in the end, it did help me to study very hard and be very disciplined. So it is not pleasant at all, of course, but it is quite effective, as we can see.
房子说，就他自己来说的话，打骂虽然就是通过打的方式，确实不是一个很好的方式，但他自己的话也是在以前学习的时候，也是受了非常多的打，就之前老师就是用一个非常长的棍子非常长的一个棍子来打他，但是虽然打的时候就是也非常的痛苦，然后就是也非常的不好受，但是确实是也很有用，之后能让法王子就是好好的休息，好好的学习，然后好好的守持戒律等。This is a request if Rinpoche can in the future use Mandarin to give teachings to us. And wonders if Rinpoche has any preparations of so.
Actually, as a child, I did learn Mandarin to some extent for several years, both writing and speaking. But then I believe that writing is too difficult for me because it's a lot of characters and it's hard to memorize all of that. So I will still look forward to learning how to speak, at least to be able to communicate. But I don't think I can do the writing. That is too difficult for me.
这个就是祈请仁波切将来能不能用汉语给弟子们讲课，有没有这样的准备？房子说，就是房子小的时候确实是学过汉语，就是学过说以及学过写汉语，但是就是写的话就比较复杂，但是就是 说的话以前学过，房子说以后有机会的话还是想要继续学汉语，但是写的话可能就比较难一点，因为有很多的字要记。This question wonders, can lay practitioners accept medicines or food from monks or nuns?
Yes, that should be fine. Yeah, as was mentioned earlier, monks can share the remaining of their food from their baking bowl. Medicines is also fine. If there's a medicine, a doctor, monk, and something like that, you can receive the medicine. It should be allowed.
这个出家人给大家人医药食品可以接受吗？房子说这个医药食品可以接受。
Ma namka da nyambe semje tamje lama sangye rinpo che la gyabso chivu sangye che dan gende namla gyabso chivu lama yedam kanje tsola gyabso chivu rangsem donsa chige gula gyabso chivu ma namka da nyambe semje tamje lama sangye rinpo che la gyabso chivu Sangye chedan gende namla gyabso chewo lama yedam kanje tsola gyabso chewo rangsem dosa chige gula gyabso chewo ma namka da nyambe semje tamche lama sangye rinpo chela gyabso chewo sangye chedan gende namla gyabso chewo lama yedam kanje tsola gyabso chewo rangsem dosa chige gula gyabso chewo o ma ne be me hu 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 ma ne be me o ma ne be me o ma ne be me Money be me, 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 be me, money 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 be me, mon Money bemel, 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 money bemel. Money bemel, 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 money bemel. Oh, money bemel, 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 money bemel. Oh, money bemel, 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 money bemel. Oh, money bemel, 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 money bemel. Money bemel, 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 money bemel. Oh, money bemel. Nedan lobro ikele gurba ye denda nedan jumbe tsewa som semje yime debe nenam gejide khamsu chungara makyuji. Chitara sheme chibe seja shin keje jila lusem taje. Soje nege dongla chinye ba jiden khamsu chungara makyuji. Chita shinje kanang chuba tar. Nege minzam tebe dachebe, ninje badan dabe rimso ge lujen guna ne para magiruji. Nebe gire dongcha geju dan lobro ye jo sumga chujo dan shiga zashe ne la soba. Lujen guna tsevra magiruji, lusemdewa malye chojebe, jungshe chube dongla chi. Malu shishin dangdo denpa dan tsere neme deke denpara sho, lama kunjo sumge tuje dan. Kanzhou Chögyong Songmen Nütü Dan Nente Luola Mebe Dento Ming Hoa Melam Dalzi Zhu Bara Sho. Namo Bana Shavari Kange Sansum Tembe Zegare Lujin Eden Legyo Loge Shaja Sungi Duzi Topashi Tada Nido Jungna Sembale Ige Chento Kapshin Chogiro De Kola Meshura Doba Chishin Kela Soa Debra De La Na Jiba Gule Gyopshin Loge Jiro Miser Jen Jungne Su Taden Chusan Lenji Nepa Shawe Chishin Yudo La Girobe Jiba Gune Gyopshi Loge Ma Kebra Toye Toge Jungwe Kam Gune Chube Jorim Chinye Da Tumen Chiwe Nesa Kangwai Jiba Gune Gyopshi Loge Ma Veda Meme Nuse Semden Be Samjuro Zume Chujulo Chiso Jesu Zewe Da Ze Nembo Ye Mingwe Yinsu Chamshi Loge Tedala Jezun Pama Loge Ma Ziji Gube Ige Soda Dine Songde Chugwe Mata Chugin Kiki Jesu Zongyo Ji Lama Yedam Sangye Chansem So Gyayu Ramjang Gyatsu Tsoje La Ziji Dongwe Yangge Sode Na Yela Membe Dende Nyuchopse Kera Ngage Wangbe Yang Dan Gune Kangwa Duja Gawe Sana Pado Chenpa La Ye Dachin Jida Shabla Sawa De Ire Jido Jegang Gyume Ka Kasa Jidu Gyurwa Ngotsaras Meje Jiden Kamge Rolba Le Teme Shuba Dine Ji Tena La Re Dakara Zangman Kenze Nube Wekara Zesone Zejen Dembe Gume Kyongke Ba Kundon Shunu Larian Yushen Tsagyu lama namge chinla dan nanjo ringa jube den doge tenpe nga ta pa den sakya pe lu sangye le chochu kyab gyuru ji. Pa den tsawe lama rinpo che dage jivru be me den shu ne ka jen chimbe go ne je son. Ku son toge ngo jo tsa do so. Che me me she son ve gul ka na che me tse jen la mo jen de mo che me tse la wa ve so nan ye che me tse ye ngue ju za du so re son be me tu ge la la ma ne ken ze nu tu ran su ye mo che sa den long to be ca ye ze ne du ja lin xie ge do Da den so nga wang yu zhu la ri kun ye dong zhu gun ga zi te jin dong nga la pian de ba do ba bi qin le jia san pe wang ye ya bu xia den so nam da chim den si ren gi sa xie la te san gong be ren qin du le man zi che zi zong dan jie den Wang Rengi Gyao Cho Re Wang Le Bor Den Shu So Gyao Wang Ni Ba Je Zi Gong Ma Nian Gyao Den Ji Du Nian Gu Ce Ma Xie Gyao Be Lam Sa Sa Mo Lob Xie Nama Gyao Wa Qi Xin Dun Zi Shab Den So Ben Zo Gyao Se Dun Gi Zha Xie Ba Ba Den Sa Ge Chu Se Bala bala ne ne cho zam ne zebe yen do chen chen shen sang song do jin da den so lu me la ma cho sum tu je dang ye dam den song ya zi tu do dang ju nie sa mo gyu me den be tu che da so we den den ju gyu ji
Che me wang bo ya wa zen ba me che ge ne de le do lo da de ma che da de ye bo le nam ba la ya che me la cho so ye ze ba zo Wai zin jo song wai jie tuo ri li Dendro Gun Ganji Be Nam Jie Tome Kando Jin Le Dora Jie Yi Se Soma Wan Jura Jin Bo Shab De Shu Te Dora Nye Ne So Wa Da Be Te Ku Ze Den Jin Te Zama Ra Pile Pi She Dan Zhu Bi Zi Zi Sa Yan Bi Ri Lo Zi Jin Bi Wi Zha Xi Yu
Se naman de ye tam je si ba nye tom ne nye pe cha na pam je ne ke ga na che ba lon chu ba ye se be co le zhuo ba shou Jamba Bavi Chidarai Kempa Dai Gundu Sambo Te Ya Te Shinde Tenda Gungi Jesu Dalo Chingi Wandi Dai Tamche Rabdu Tu Somo Shepe Gyabo Tamche Gingo Kaka Shodo Ngabade Dagi Gebe Zawa Diku Kyan Sambo Juchi Rabdo Waragi Chancho Gyobe Gyobai Chokyo Bai Kidro Yatsu Yosu Kawe Kari Chudri Demba Sanse Ba Kya Ba Ye Demba Ge Gyuruji Kanchen Pegi Dewa Dorje Demba Den Sake Chusi Ba Gyuruji Chube Dongi Ginje Mepa Dan Gyungyan Jinde Nam Ga Nyam Ba Sho. Okay, thank you.